Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, and welcome to our webinar commemorating the birth centenary of one of the greatest filmmakers of all time, Satyajit Ray. Director, screenwriter, author, essayist, editor, illustrator, lyricist, calligrapher, and music composer. Before we commence, some basic housekeeping. Please keep your microphones muted and videos turned off if you're joining us on Google Meet for the entire duration of the program, unless, of course, you're speaking. It will otherwise affect our live stream on YouTube. And to those who are joining us on YouTube, I extend a warm welcome on behalf of Maharaja Manindra Chandra College and my colleagues. Satyajit Ray began his career in advertising, as we know, leaving behind that world later to pursue his passion for filmmaking. Ray spent some of his formative years studying at Vishwabharati in Shantiniketan, where he was mentored by Vinod Bihari Mukherjee and Nandalal Bose, which contributed greatly to not only his understanding of commercial art, but also helped widen his worldview by exposing him to a life outside of his familiar urban city makeup, the nuances of which we see clearly reflected in Ray's unforgettable career spanning decades. Ray joined advertising after his time in Shantiniketan, during which period he created a veritable portfolio of striking print ads while simultaneously designing book covers and jackets for Signet Press. This experience ensured that Ray started designing extraordinary posters for his own films as well, with meticulous detail, using various media such as charcoal, crayon, pastel, on canvas, in litho, on silk screen. There's very little I can say about Ray which has not already been documented in one form or another. The poetry of his frames, the magic of his moving images, and the transformative beauty of his words have had an emotional impact on me that's difficult to define. His works have also stirred passions in me that I was hardly aware of, opening my eyes to the dynamics of human relationships that one needs an entire lifetime possibly to experience. We are extremely honored to have with us three speakers today who have engaged intimately with Ray's art and will share their thoughts with us. Without further ado, I will take this opportunity to express my gratitude to our invited speakers and guests. I'm looking forward to two exciting, engaging, and exhilarating days of conversations on the maestro. As Manik Babu had once said, and I quote, "Cinema's characteristic forte is its ability to capture and communicate the intimacies of the human mind. Somehow, I feel that an ordinary person, the man in the street, if you like, is a more challenging subject for exploration than people in the heroic mold. It is the half shades, the hardly audible notes that I want to capture," unquote. Here's hoping that we will also be able to explore some of these difficult to fathom shades and hardly audible notes about Manik Babu's oeuvre over the next couple of days. On that note, I will now invite the Honorable Principal of our college, Dr. Monturam Shamanto, to offer the welcome address and formally inaugurate our webinar. Over to you, sir. Please bear with us. I believe we are facing certain technical glitches. Please bear with us for a couple of minutes as we try to straighten this out. Over to you, sir. Sir, could you please unmute your microphone? Monaliti, could I request you to take over?
Just a second, Shomrita.
Yes.
What I would do, I would ask principal to talk on my phone, and I'm putting it on the microphone so that
Sure.
all can hear. There is
Sure.
some network glitches from his
Sure.
end. Okay?
Sure. Sure.
স্যার প্লিজ বলুন। Just a second, Shobhita. What I would do, I would ask principal to talk on my phone and I'm putting it on the microphones here and here. Then if I'm networking just from here to here. স্যার বলুন।
আমার কথা শোনা যাচ্ছে তো?
হ্যাঁ আমি শুনতে পাচ্ছি, আমি মাইক্রোফোনের সামনে দিচ্ছি, আপনি বলুন, সবাই শুনতে পাবে।
হ্যাঁ দিয়ে দিন। শুভ মধ্যাহ্ন। আজকে একটি গুরুত্বপূর্ণ দিনে আমাদের কলেজের সেমিনার সাব কমিটি সকলকে নিয়ে যে একটি মহতী আলোচনা সভার আয়োজন করেছে, আমাদের দেশের বিখ্যাত মনীষী, সাহিত্যিক এবং বিশ্ববিখ্যাত ফিল্ম ডাইরেক্টর সত্যজিৎ রায়ের জন্ম শতবর্ষ উপলক্ষে আজকে যে সেমিনারের ওয়েবিনারের আয়োজন করা হয়েছে, তার জন্য আমি আমাদের কলেজের সেমিনার সাব কমিটির সকল সদস্যকে বিশেষভাবে ধন্যবাদ জানাই। সত্যজিৎ রায় এমন একজন মানুষ ছিলেন যাকে স্মরণ করার মাধ্যমে আমরা যেমন আমাদের দেশের ঐতিহ্যকে, আমাদের দেশের সাহিত্যকে সম্মান জানাবো, এমনি তার শিক্ষার মাধ্যমে আমরা আমাদের শিক্ষা ব্যবস্থাকে যেমন সমৃদ্ধ করতে পারবো, তেমনি আমরা ছাত্রছাত্রীদের উদ্বুদ্ধ করতে পারবো এই বিখ্যাত মনীষীর জন্ম শতবর্ষ উপলক্ষে এই সেমিনারের আয়োজনের মাধ্যমে। আমরা সবাই জানি যে সত্যজিৎ রায় 1921 সালে জন্মগ্রহণ করেছিলেন 2রা মে, এবং এই 2021 সালের 2রা মে তার 100 বছর পূর্ণ হয়ে গেছে। অর্থাৎ আমরা এখন যে বছরটা চলছে সেটা আসলে 101তম বছর তার জীবনে, তিনি বেঁচে থাকলে। এই সময়ে আমরা সারা ভারতবর্ষ জুড়ে সত্যজিৎ রায়কে আমরা স্মরণ করছি। আমরা অত্যন্ত আনন্দিত যে আমাদের কলেজের পক্ষ থেকেও আমাদের সেমিনার সাব কমিটি এইরকম একটি এই প্যান্ডেমিক সিচুয়েশনের ভেতরেও একটি সেমিনারের আয়োজন করতে পেরেছে। সত্যজিৎ রায় আমাদের দেশকে যেমন তিনি সম্মানিত করেছেন, তিনি বাঙালি হিসাবে আমাদের বাংলাকে এবং আমাদের বাঙালি মানুষকে, বাঙালি মননকে তিনি আমাদের সম্মানিত করেছেন, উদ্বুদ্ধ করেছেন, গর্বিত করেছেন। আমাদের কাছে সত্যজিৎ রায় দুটো দিক দিয়েই বরেণ্য। প্রথমত তিনি প্রথম ভারতীয়, এবং আমরা খুব গর্বিত যে তিনি প্রথম বাঙালি যিনি আমাদের ভারতবর্ষের এই চলচ্চিত্র শিল্পকে পৃথিবীর দরবারে পৌঁছে দিয়েছিলেন। 1955 সালে তার প্রথম ছবি পথের পাঁচালী, বিভূতিভূষণ বন্দ্যোপাধ্যায়ের লেখা যে কাহিনী, সেই কাহিনীর উপর পথের পাঁচালী তিনি চলচ্চিত্রায়ন করে, এবং পরের বছরই 56 সালে কান চলচ্চিত্র উৎসবে তিনি শ্রেষ্ঠ পুরস্কার লাভ করেছিলেন। পরবর্তী ক্ষেত্রে তিনি বহু চলচ্চিত্র নির্মাণ করেছেন। তার গুপি গাইন, বাঘা বাইন, জলসাঘর, শাখা প্রশাখা ইত্যাদি বহু চলচ্চিত্র নির্মাণ করে তিনি ভারতবর্ষকে চলচ্চিত্র শিল্পে যে একজন প্রতিষ্ঠিত হিসাবে তিনি ভারতবর্ষকে তুলে ধরতে পেরেছেন। এমনকি আমি দেখেছি সত্যজিৎ রায়ের শেষ ছবি, শুধু সত্যজিৎ রায়ের না, এই শেষ ছবিটাও তিনি অভিনয় করেছেন উৎপল দত্ত, তারও শেষ ছবি ছিল আগন্তুক। তার যে চলচ্চিত্রের আলাদা দৃষ্টিভঙ্গি ছিল, তিনি যে ভারতীয় সাহিত্যকে এবং ভারতীয় শিল্পকে অন্য দিকে, অন্য ভাবে তুলে ধরতে পারতেন, সেটাই আমরা দেখেছি তার বিভিন্ন চলচ্চিত্রের মাধ্যমে। সত্যজিৎ রায় যে দ্বিতীয় দিক, তিনি একজন প্রখ্যাত সাহিত্যিক হিসাবে গণ্য হতে পেরেছেন। বিশেষ করে আমাদের বাংলা সাহিত্য তো বটেই, তিনি অনেক বিদেশি সাহিত্যের অনুবাদও করেছেন। আমি অত্যন্ত আনন্দিত হয়েছিলাম একসময় 1992 সালে যখন সত্যজিৎ রায় প্রয়াত হচ্ছেন। ঠিক সেই সময়, সেই বছরই আমি একটি কলেজ থেকে আরেকটি কলেজে স্থানান্তরিত হয়েছিলাম। তখন আমার পুরনো কলেজ, নদিয়া জেলার মাঝদিয়া কলেজ, তাদের শিক্ষক সমিতি আমাকে একটি ফেয়ারওয়েল দিয়েছিল এবং সেই ফেয়ারওয়েলে আমাকে সত্যজিৎ রায়ের রচিত একটি গ্রন্থ সেরা সত্যজিৎ, অনেকগুলো গল্পের সংকলন, সেই সেরা সত্যজিৎ বইটি আমাকে তারা উপহার হিসেবে দিয়েছিলেন। আমি অত্যন্ত আনন্দিত আজকের দিনে যে সেই সত্যজিৎ রায়ের আমরা জন্ম উপলক্ষে ওয়েবিনারের আয়োজন করতে পেরেছি। সাহিত্যিক হিসাবে সত্যজিৎ রায়ের একটি পরম্পরা ছিল। তার দাদু উপেন্দ্র কিশোর রায়চৌধুরী এবং বাবা ছিলেন সুকুমার রায়, এরা সবাই প্রখ্যাত সাহিত্যিক, বিশেষ করে শিশু সাহিত্যিক হিসাবে সম্মান লাভ করেছিলেন। সত্যজিৎ রায় সেই পরম্পরা ধরে নিয়ে তিনি অনেক সাহিত্য রচনা করেছেন, যা আমাদের বাংলা সাহিত্যকে সমৃদ্ধ করেছে তো বটেই, এমনকি বিশ্বের সাহিত্যের দরবারে তিনি তার রচনাকে তুলে ধরতে পেরেছেন। তা আমি আর বিশেষ সত্যজিৎ রায় সম্পর্কে বলবো না। আজকে যারা স্পিকার আছেন, বক্তা আছেন আজকের আলোচনা সভায়, তারা সত্যজিৎ রায়ের সম্পর্কে, তার অবদান সম্পর্কে অনেক কথা বলবেন। আমরা সেগুলো শোনার জন্য অধীর আগ্রহে অপেক্ষা করছি। আমি শুধু বলবো, আজকের সত্যজিৎ রায় নিয়ে যে আলোচনা সভা হবে, যে আলোচনা সভা চলছে, আমরা যে বক্তব্যগুলো শুনবো, তার মাধ্যমে আমরা যেমন আমাদের দেশের একজন বরেণ্য ব্যক্তিকে সম্মান জানাতে পারবো, তাকে স্মরণ করতে পারবো, তেমনি চলচ্চিত্র এবং সাহিত্যের মাধ্যমে তিনি আমাদের দেশবাসীকে যে শিক্ষা প্রদান করেছেন, সেই শিক্ষা আমরা আমাদের পরবর্তী প্রজন্মকে প্রদান করতে পারবো। আমাদের যারা অর্গানাইজার, আমাদের সেমিনার সাব কমিটি সদস্যদের, বিশেষ করে অধ্যাপিকা মোনালি পোদ্দার, আমাদের মধ্যে আমাদের একদম ইয়াং চ্যাপ অধ্যাপিকা আছেন গাঙ্গুলি, সমৃতা গাঙ্গুলি, সবাইকে বলবো আজকের এই যে আলোচনা সভা, তার যেন বিষয়বস্তুটা আমাদের কাছে রেকর্ড থাকে, আমরা সবটা যাতে রেকর্ড করতে পারি। পরবর্তী ক্ষেত্রে আমরা বইয়ের আকারে ছেপে আমরা আমাদের পরবর্তী ছাত্রছাত্রী, পরবর্তী প্রজন্মের জন্য রেখে যেতে পারবো। তো আমি আজকে কলেজের অধ্যক্ষ হিসাবে আজকে যারা আয়োজন করেছেন, আমাদের সেই সেমিনার সাব কমিটির সমস্ত সদস্য, যারা অংশগ্রহণ করছেন, আমাদের শিক্ষক শিক্ষিকা, ছাত্রছাত্রী, আমাদের কলেজের যারা প্রাক্তন শিক্ষক শিক্ষিকা, আমাদের শিক্ষাকর্মী এবং আমাদের বিভিন্ন অতিথি, যাদেরকে আমরা আমন্ত্রণ জানিয়েছি এই ওয়েবিনারে অংশগ্রহণ করার জন্য, এবং বিশেষ করে আজকে যে তিনজন স্পিকার, বক্তা আজকে বক্তব্য রাখবেন এই সত্যজিৎ রায়ের জন্ম শতবর্ষ উপলক্ষে আয়োজিত ওয়েবিনারে, তাদের সবাইকে আমি কলেজের পক্ষ থেকে আন্তরিকভাবে স্বাগত জানাচ্ছি। এবং সেই সঙ্গে আজকের ওয়েবিনার একটি সার্থক ওয়েবিনার হিসাবে এটি গণ্য হবে, এই প্রত্যাশা রেখে আমার কথা শেষ করছি। নমস্কার, ধন্যবাদ, সবাই ভালো থাকুন। ধন্যবাদ।
ধন্যবাদ স্যার। সমৃতা, তুমি এবার শুরু করে দাও।
Thank you. Thank you so much, sir, for sharing your thoughts with us and also for your continued support and encouragement. Thank you also to our audience for bearing with us. We are trying our best to smoothen out some of these rough edges, but as you know, technology is sometimes, unfortunately, beyond our control. Thanks for being with us. Moving on, it gives me great pleasure to now introduce our first invited speaker, Mr. Joy Sengupta. Joy Sengupta is an Indian film, television, and theatre actor and voiceover artist. He got his Bachelor of Arts degree in English Honours from Delhi University. He obtained a PG diploma in theatre studies, specializing in acting, from the Living Theatre Academy under the directorship of Professor Ibrahim Al-Qazi. He has performed street theatre under the directorship of Comrade Safdar Hashmi and has worked under the mentorship of theatre legends like Habib Tanvir, M.K. Raina, and Barry John, among others. He is a recipient of the Mahindra Excellence Award in Theatre for his portrayal of the character of M.K. Gandhi. He also received the V. Shantaram Award for his debut film, Hazar Chaurasi Ki Maa, directed by one of the doyens of parallel cinema in India, Govind Nahalani. Joy has traveled with his plays from Broadway to West End London, from Sydney to Edinburgh. Joy has acted in over 40 feature films in Hindi, English, and Bangla, many of which received national and international awards in Chicago, New Orleans, and Sao Paulo, among others. He has collaborated with BBC Channel 4 to create Indo-centric audio drama. Joy is also known for his illustrious voice acting career, and he has dubbed for Hollywood blockbuster films. Most notably, he has dubbed into Hindi the character of Captain America from the Avengers series, essayed by Chris Evans. Joy has acted in around 30 telefilms and 7 web series now available on OTT platforms, including the recently successful Sacred Games. Some of Joy's notable films are Anjana Anjani, Hate Story, Patal Ghor, Kabujir Bo, Bhalo Me Kharap Me, and Biday Bomkesh. Joy, it's an absolute honor to have you here today. Thank you for taking time off from your rehearsals and joining us today. Just want to quickly mention for our audience that Joy is currently rehearsing for the play Lockdown Liaisons, based on a book by Shobha Dey, where he will be performing alongside Lilith Dubey and Ira Dubey. I also want to mention to our audience that Joy wants to make this session an interactive one, so we will be taking questions from you as Joy speaks. Please use the live chat option on YouTube or the chat box on Google Meet to note down your questions, comments, and observations. My colleagues will be forwarding them to the speaker. Joy, over to you. It's a pleasure to have you here today.
Ashish Dhanyavad, thank you so much for having me, giving me the opportunity. Many thanks for burdening me with this extended eulogy of my career, whatever it may mean. But I must share that the topic that we have been invited to talk on, discuss, is highly daunting for someone like me, because I do not come from the stream of pedagogy. I come from the stream of practical execution. And therefore, I'm acutely aware that as far as Ray is concerned, not a single element of his personality and creativity has remained unanalyzed or unobserved, or, realms and realms of discussions have been written, printed, communicated over the years. And a man who is not just a cult figure, but a figure who has achieved a sort of a religiosity in Bengal in terms of the kind of worship and the obeisance that we pay him. So on that topic, for someone like me who still considers himself a foot soldier of in arts and ideas, it is definitely an added pressure that I've taken upon myself. So I wanted to make this session a more personal one rather than the polemical one, because I personally believe that I wear two hats, distinct two hats. One is an insider who has been involved in the arts and craft of cinema for the last 25 years. But before that, and more than that, I am an avid lover of cinema and a fanatical watcher of cinema. Now, this is a very, very, very important hat. Just like I studied literature, and I was skeptical that my studying of literature might take away the pleasure of reading storybooks from me, and I was scared of that. So the whole idea was, how do I bridge this my vicarious pleasure of reading a book to the actual analysis and the polemics of understanding literature. The similar attempt has crept into my effort within cinema, because when I started doing cinema, when I started becoming an insider, understanding the nitty-gritties of cinema, I was scared that I might lose the love and interest of watching a cinema and reacting to it spontaneously. Yeah, but that has not gone. Thankfully, that has not gone. Why I stress on this point is Rai Babu was most acutely interested in this aspect of cinema. More than most other auteurs, I won't say all auteurs, but most other auteurs, Rai Babu was the one who was extremely, should I say, stressful about the importance of the movie-going audience, public, and how they respond to his art of communication. Now, it could be a form of book, which he indulged in, a painting, or cinema being his primary medium. I know for sure that when a film of his didn't do well in the hall, not just the festival circuit, that film may have clicked highly in the festival circuit, but didn't do well in the hall, he would be very, very disappointed and crestfallen. Now, which director does this? You know, most other directors who come under the bracket of authorship, most of the directors who generally are more interested in being critically acclaimed or festival adorned, generally tend to surpass this aspect. It is as if they think they're much above and beyond the audience's cinema IQ. I understand and I believe there are different kinds of audiences who watch cinema. So audiences can never be bracketed within one identity. There will be cinema literate urban audience, there will be cinema semi-literate urban audience, there will be a cinema semi-literate rural audience, and there will be completely cinema illiterate rural audience. So there are different kinds of audiences, and therefore we have different kinds of cinema. Rai Babu was one person who believed in a cinema which spoke to people, about his time, about his aesthetics, and about his faith and belief in humanity. And he wanted to speak clearly and eloquently. This is very, very important. Often, he's accused by certain skeptics who believe in modernism and avant-gardism that Rai Babu belongs to the old school of cinema, the classical school of cinema, whose narrative is rather simplistic, or belongs to the realistic idiom of European art and culture. I do not belong to that category. I believe Rai Babu borrowed and reinvented the various modes of artistic communication that was there in 20th century. And they all crept into cinema. Maybe they were not overtly visible. And that is where the greatness of Rai Babu's art comes. I'll give you a simple example. In the 40s, there was an emergence of what you call psychological realism in American cinema. So the American cinema was character and plot driven. This was the element of American cinema which made it into a global soft power. People love character-driven cinema. It's it's the easiest to understand. You journey with a character. People love plot twists because that goes on to somehow kindle our baser instincts. And American cinema was established on that. Psychological realism crept into American cinema through the group theater movement of America, through Elia Kazan and Stella Adler and Lee Strasberg, etc., etc. And the directors who came from the group theater moved into American cinema, utilized actors like Brando, James Dean, Paul Newman, etc., etc., and drew out and juiced these elements of psychological realism in cinema. Then comes the idiom of cinema which influenced him probably the most, which is the post-World War cinema from Europe called neorealism. The Viscontis and the De Sicas, who tried to place a man within the social realistic environment and just observe that environment in its minute detail. That's called neorealism. Rai Babu is often accused, or not accused, I would say, labeled as a neorealist filmmaker. There were other two filmmaking traditions in Europe at that time. One was from the Eastern Bloc, the Russia-dominated, USSR-dominated, which is called the Socialist Realism, where cinema indulged in giving very clear socialistic egalitarian messages through relationships. That was called the Socialist Realism. And then exploded in the 50s in Europe, the avant-garde, the modernistic approach of cinema, which came from the French New Wave. You know, the Godards and the Truffauts and the Chabrol's who came there. Now, I don't know whether people will agree, but I have seen all these four elements in Rai Babu's cinema and one more element. Rai Babu is labeled as a person who established Indian cinema globally. Absolutely correct. He spoke a language of cinema which was universal, which was distinct from the Indian language of cinema which is prevalent. And yet Rai Babu incorporated certain elements of Indian cinema from the 30s and 40s. In fact, the elements from where Indian cinema emerged, which is the folksy element. Because Indian cinema actually came out of the folk and traditional arts. You know, the traditional arts of the Ramayana, the Ramayana Katha, the narrative style of Ramayana, the episodic style of Ramayana came into Indian cinema. And the folksy style, because we had songs and dances in cinema, which was the folksy style. You know, where there is a narrator, there is a Kathanayak, there is a Sutradhar who will tell you the story, Ek tha Raja, Ek thi Rani. And the story went like that. Indian cinema was based on these elements. And Rai Babu used that element also, which you are aware of from the kind of movies he made, which was intrinsically based on the folksy elements. So Rai Babu was a storyteller. More than a juggler of craft and a trickery of the auteur theory, he was basically a storyteller. Uni bolten je ekta jomiyo goppo bola jak, which means like we invite people to our house and we have an adda session, a stimulating adda session. We could be discussing Marx and Hegel in the adda session. We could be discussing Maradona and Kapil Dev in the adda session. It didn't matter. The adda session was accessible, it was argumentative, and it was experiential. And Rai Babu believed in that particular tradition of conversation, of communication, of accessibility and acceptance. And therefore, in Jai Babu's cinema, the craft sometimes goes invisible, but it is prevalent there. We have seen his neorealistic influences in the Apu trilogy, very distinctly, very clearly. The absolutely nuanced, naturalistic detail of the cinema places them in the neorealistic category. But more than that, we have seen psychological realism in Rai Babu cinema, which is borrowed from the Hollywood tradition. He has done more character-driven films than the other two auteurs, Mr. Ghatak and Mr. Sen. You know, his films are very, very character-driven. We journey with those characters, whether it is Pratidwandi or Jono Oronno or the plethora of characters in Oronne Din Ratri, or Nayok. The primary example is Nayok. There is a character in the center and there is a character opposite who is sort of acting as an antagonist. And the narration of the film is almost like a plot twist. So Rai Babu is indulging in plot twists. In Jono Oronno, we have very clear plotting of where the protagonist is going to land. Will he find a job or not? And what cost? It's a plot twist. It's a sort of a social thriller, according to me. You know, then comes the space of the avant-garde, which was the French New Wave, as I spoke about, where the narration of structure is broken up. You know, there is no clear beginning, middle, and end. It could go from any direction, come from any angle. It could be a stream of consciousness, you know, where your stream of consciousness led. It would be idea-driven rather than character-driven. And Rai Babu was one of the persons in Indian cinema who I think introduced this element of, you know, the idea-driven cinema. I consider his film, oh my God, see, I'm suddenly having a lapse of this thing, Kanchenjunga. Now, Kanchenjunga is an idea-driven cinema, more than character-driven cinema. There is an idea where we pick up these characters, this huge joint family of petty bourgeois family of Bengal, and place them in the hills and the hillocks around Kanchenjunga. And in a given 24-hour day, with the changing pattern of the weather, we will inspect the changing pattern of the relationship. This is an idea. This is an avant-garde idea. This is not about a protagonist and an antagonist. It is not about a plotting of where the action is going to move. It doesn't matter where the action moves. It doesn't matter how the film ends. What matters is the essence of it in every frame which is there. Every conversation, every word exchange, or every stare exchange. That's even in Oronne Din Ratri. you'll find these intrinsic patterns which is emerging. There is no plot as such. You are again plating a certain 4-5 characters and urban educated characters, so-called modern men, and you're throwing them into a jungle space where suddenly the primitive elements of their baser instincts come out, emerge, and how that influences their responses. That's what Rai Babu was looking at. Then we come to, say, the socialist realism. Now, obviously, Rai Babu has not made any film which is I would say, directly socialistic realistic. Yet, there are certain films where Rai Babu made which have a social anger, very clear social rage hidden in them. When I see Mohanagar, I see a social rage in them. I see the gender questions coming out evocatively, because that's what Rai Babu's style is, evocatively, rather than on your face. But it comes out, and it comes out with elements of rage at times. When I see Pratidwandi, I am enraged. I get enraged even today when I see Pratidwandi, as the protagonist got enraged. Amra ki Januar, and he screams in the end. And that's Rai Babu's scream. Amra ki Januar. You know, that's a 20th century guttural scream that Rai Babu comes out with over there. Then there are the socialist satire that he made. The Goopika and Bhagavine, the ultimate anti-war film. Imagine making a children's film and creating such a discourse for pacifism. And its follow-up, Hero Rajat Deshe. I mean, that is a film that is probably the finest anti-fascist film I've seen coming out of India. Nowhere in the world has someone made a film which is so folksy, so dancey, so musical, so rhythmic, so childlike, and yet it dismantles the very edifice of fascism throughout and at the end of it. So, just see the range of stuff that he involved himself in. He was constantly learning. He never gave up learning. He never gave up on any particular idiom of cinema. He never rejected. Most of the auteurs tend to reject others and focus on themselves. That is why they say, you know, I am the beginner of a particular cinematic movement, because there's a need. Rai Babu absorbed all the movements, and they came into his cinema in an invisible way and emerged so beautifully, and yet Rai Babu never faltered on storytelling. Jomiya Goppabala was there. Whether it was a story by Premchand, Sadgati, can we ever remain unscathed by a film like Sadgati? It scathes you, it burns you. Or another story by Premchand, which was the chess player. There, we actually re-evaluate the idea of colonialism and nationalism, how colonialism and imperialism works, and how new nationalistic attitude has to emerge from the older feudalistic attitude. Now, such complex elements Rai Babu is saying, such complex elements Rai Babu is dissecting, and yet we do not see the dissection. We see it invisible. It comes across as a story of these two people, passionate and mad about chess, coming from the Ganga Jamuna Sanskriti of our country, coming from the so-called, the ideal Hindustani secular ethos of this country, and how it has been usurped by the emerging colonialism, imperialism, which is going to go on to create the divide and rule within our country and communalized atmosphere, which we are today reacting to. So Rai Babu is attempting all these things, and yet he's telling a story. He's getting in the audience. He's charming them. He's creating an experiential feeling in them, so that you go back and somewhere within your consciousness, there is an element of Rai Babu's aesthetics added. There is a certain raise in your literacy, not just cinema literacy, but general aesthetic literacy. And I, as an artist and as a human being, greatly borrow my aesthetics from these elements of Rai Babu. The way Rai Babu turned the lens to these elements, which I realized right from the first time I saw his film, certain elements would register in me, and then the analysis will happen. And furthermore, in my matured years, I could, somehow disseminate all these elements and understand the greatness of that man, So my reaction to him, as I said, is personal. I watch a film of Rai Babu like I watch a film of Denis Villeneuve, a Dune, and I watch it for vicarious pleasure. But then I go back to it and I would watch it for maybe the visual metaphors. And then I'll go back to it and watch it for maybe the sound editing, the way sound editing is used in Aparajita. So, he will give you these layers to absorb and approach and go back to again and again. Unless a director, unless a writer, unless an aesthete gives you these so many layers, you will not be able to go back to it. You'll see it once and you'll go out, right? Or you will see it once and you will feel too befuddled and feel too remote and you'll say, oh my God, I don't understand, and you'll go out. Rai Babu doesn't belong to the category. Rai Babu invites you, makes you watch it, gives you the pleasure, then says, come back again, now see the elements, now inspect the elements, now grow, now become a better human being, better cinema watcher. So these are the stuff that I wanted to touch upon. One can go on many other stuff, but I know you have other panels to talk to, and I'm sure they'll touch upon other stuff. I would rather have an exchange with people who want to explore or have been influenced by Rai Babu's aesthetics as much as I have.
Thank you, Joy. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us. I also want to invite our audience to take this opportunity to now note down their comments, questions, and observations for Joy. And while we wait for that, and my colleague Mitali D is collecting questions from the YouTube live chat. While we wait for that, Joy, maybe I will kickstart with one of my own. Sure. You've talked about how Rai Babu has influenced your aesthetics, influenced your politics. I'm curious to know what impact he's had on you as a creator.
Very interesting question. He was probably the first person or the first cinema director to recognize the art of acting in cinema, distinct from the art of acting in theater and other mediums, radio included. At that time, radio acting was quite prevalent. In our cinema, at that time, acting used to be borrowed from theater or the theatrical devices. The Parsi theater had a huge influence on our cinema. So you would see that if you watch the old Devdas and old movies, there's a pattern of speaking. Devdas, tum kab aoge Devdas? These patterns of speaking, the articulation of it was basically to create that clarity on stage and make your voice travel. The Jatra had a huge influence in cinema. The Tamasha medium in Marathi cinema had a huge influence on it. So we were borrowing from the theatrical traditions and not able to marry it successfully into the cinematic tradition. Satyajit Ray recognized the idea of acting in cinema is the absence of acting. Not just the absence of theatricality, but the absence of acting. Which means in cinema, you got to be in a state of being. When you are in a state of being, the lens catches that state of being and what is going on within you. So when you see Soumitra Chatterjee's anguished face, you don't hear him, you just see his anguished face and you understand the anguish where it is coming from. That's the job of the lens, to catch where it is coming from. When you see Madhubadi's expression of minute jealousy in Charulata, she's not saying anything, she's not doing anything. The lens is capturing what is going on in her heart, in her subconscious. So cinema has the power to catch the subconscious. In theater, we narrate the subconscious. We have to articulate the subconscious. Cinema is a medium. Its power is that it can capture the subconscious. It doesn't have to always dwell in the conscious element of acting. So Rai Babu's cinema was based on the subconscious. Look at Pratidwandi. Every time the protagonist enters the room, he sees people talking. He sees them in film negative. And there is a particular freeze frame. It's almost as if he's seeing them through their skin and bones and flesh and bones, seeing all their organs and hearing their inner thoughts. So what they're saying is one thing, but what the protagonist is hearing or absorbing is another thing. This duality is can be captured in cinema. In theater, we will narrate. That's why the chorus comes in Greek tragedies, where the chorus is narrating our subconscious. It's the character is saying something, Electra is saying something, Orestes is saying something, but the chorus is telling the audience what they are going through, what Greece is going through, what Macedonia is going through. In cinema, the lens captures that essence. Rai Babu was the first person in Indian cinema who could dwell in lensing of the thought of the subconscious.
Thank you, Joy. That was very elaborate. I am going to invite my colleague, Monali Di, to please bring to us the questions from the YouTube live chat box. Monali, Mitali Di, if you could please unmute yourself.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Joy. It was a wonderful experience to share with you. I have a few questions from the audience. Mr. Shushanto Chakraborty has asked you whether you have any views on Hiragaraja Deshe, and Mr. Akash Maji, and he has asked you what are your views on Professor Shonku and Feluda, characters like this?
First, I will attempt Hiragaraja Deshe, which actually I touched upon. This thing. Hiragaraja Deshe is a marvel because it's a amalgamation of different genres. As I said, he borrowed from the folk genre of India, highly and heavily. Hiragaraja Deshe is a folk film, according to me. If there is anything called a folk film, Hiragaraja Deshe is that. And yet it is not just a folk film because you have characters speaking in limericks, which is borrowed from the nonsensical tradition of Abul Tabul. So Rai Babu borrows from the Abul Tabul aspect of nonsensical rhyme. And in nonsense, there is sense. So Rai Babu creates sense out of nonsense in Hiragaraja Deshe. Then there is the musical element, where the characters are singing to you. And it is said that the music, it is normally said that the music is the purest form of art because it penetrates our heart and soul. Nothing penetrates our senses as astutely as music does. And Rai Babu understood the power of music. And he used songs in Hiragaraja Deshe not just to communicate what the social elements of it, but the general structure, the social structure is also brought into the songs of Hiragaraja Deshe. And then comes the narrative element of the film. The narrative element of the film follows a certain particular rhythm. There's a certain rhythm to the film. You know, creating a rhythm, that kind of musical rhythm to a film in its very narrative structure is not very easy. When we watch it like children. He makes us watch it like children. But when we finish watching the film, what do we go back with? Dori Dhore Marotan Raja Hobe Khan Khan. That is what we take home, you know. Dori Dhore Marotan Raja Hobe Khan Khan, the times of the kings and the monarchs, or the politicians who behave like despots and kings and monarchs is over. The people are supreme. The people will always be supreme. Let's go back to that idea. Rai Babu very, very profoundly and yet directly makes this element clear to us. In terms of Professor Shonku and Feluda, I have to say that one of the earliest films of Satyajit Ray that I watched was Sonar. Now, it is called a children's film, and yet it is not necessarily a children's film because the protagonist is a highly observant, highly intelligent, extremely erudite, very exposed private detective whose every word and every observation is based on something much more than here and now. So it needs a certain level of maturity. And yet it became a children's film for me when I watched it at the age of 6 maybe. Here again, he takes a little kid in the center. The private detective is not in the center. The kid is in the center. We're looking at the world from the kid's point of view, from the kid's eyes, the wonderment of the kid. And then we are seeing Feluda or the character's perspective of dissecting, of observing, of bringing a discursive element of the child's point of view. So there is the child's point of view through which the film travels, and there is the private detective's extremely erudite, intelligent observation, which then collides with this child's point of view. And finally, we see the third element of the film, which is the historical, the sociological, the spiritual element which comes out of a film like Sonar Killa. One film, so many elements. There is the geographical beauty, there is the humor of Lal Mohan Babu, there is the kids' wonderment, there is the element of reincarnation woven in, there is the element of the greed driving very sensible, educated, intelligent people towards crime. And then there is Feluda and his observation and assimilation of all of this. Feluda is in a way, I call Feluda a universe by himself, because he's not just a private detective who's detecting. He is a communicator of everything. He will tell us about Herge's caricature of Tintin and how that came about, and he can discuss the difference between watercolor and oil in painting. He can discuss the difference in the literary traditions of India. He can discuss the elements of food and cuisine. He can discuss everything. And when he discusses all that, what Rai Babu is doing is he's helping us to grow with these observations. He's elevating our own consciousness through Feluda. So Feluda is not just a private eye, like in most films. He is actually an elevator of our consciousness. And Professor Shonku was by far my favorite genre, because I love science fiction, but I love science fiction which is humanizing science fiction. There are certain science fiction which is about almost science voodoo level, where you're constantly breaking your brain to understand the elements and intrinsic. Not in Professor Shonku. Professor Shonku keeps going back in time, in historicity, and connects us to our civilizational roots of various civilizations, Egyptian civilization, Western civilization, Indian civilization, and he humanizes science so beautifully, which is what Satyajit Ray does. Through Professor Shonku, he humanizes science, and I really appreciate Satyajit Ray for that, because he was a rationalist, an agnostic maybe not an atheist, an agnostic, and a rationalist. And all his rational elements you can see in Feluda, the way he dissects, and you can see it far more in Professor Shonku, the way he humanizes the whole idea of looking at the world from a rationalistic point of view.
Thanks, Joy. Mitaliti, just want to invite you for maybe
two more questions.
Yes.
One is from Aparna Mondal. She's asking, was there any influence of Akira Kurosawa on Ray? And the second question for you is posed by Bhashwati Pal. She's asking you whether what is the hallucination? What do you have to say about the hallucination phase of Mukul in Sonar Killa?
Akira Kurosawa and Ray shared a complementary relationship, the way it should be between great directors. Akira Kurosawa borrowed from John Ford's cinematic elements, John Ford's rigor of cinema, as he called it, where the camera goes into a rigor of action. Kurosawa borrowed that. Ray did not directly borrow from Kurosawa. Ray appreciated Kurosawa, but Ray did not directly borrow from Kurosawa. Yet there is one element of Kurosawa which is common in Ray, which is the classicism. When Kurosawa creates the samurai films, it's purely based on an epic classical structure. And Ray's cinema also, certain films also had this epic structure. Jolcha God for me is an epic film. Even though there are so few characters inhabit the space in Jolcha God, one person. But that one person in that palace, in that time of transition, creates an epic tragic figure. And Kurosawa's cinema had a lot of epic tragic figures. The Red Beard is one film where you see the closest to Ray's tradition of cinema. Red Beard, this doctor, rationalist, wants to do good, keeps coming across all kinds of opposition in a society which is still hung up on tradition and etc. etc. Ray has explored these elements in quite a few films. Jolcha being one of them, Devi is another one of them, and towards the end of his career in Agantuk and stuff like that, you see these kind of characters who seem out of touch with their time, but they are actually the idealists we should be relying upon. So Ray's characters have a touch of idealism, like Kurosawa's character. Ray's characters have the touch of epic pathos, which like Kurosawa's character, and Ray had made certain films which had this classical structure which Kurosawa's cinema also inhabited. And Mukul's hallucination, as I said, cinema is the medium which can explore the dream world like no other. You know that someone like Alfred Hitchcock himself involved Dali when he was making Spellbound to create a cinematic idiom of surrealistic elements. Then Louis Buñuel made film after film after film which were surrealistic in nature and collaborated with Dali directly in 3 films and this thing. So cinema is a medium which can go, as I said, into subconscious and maybe into unconscious. When we are sleeping or when we are dead. Ray used the elements of ghost in Gopika and Bhagavan. That to me is an element of unconscious, Ghosts may exist, may not exist, we don't know. But, it is something which happens after death. That's an unconscious element. And subconscious elements has been used by Ray in every film. As I said, Ray greatly rejoiced delving into psychological realism. So Mukul's hallucination, Feluda's rational dissection, they both, as I said, are in a way run parallel in the film.
Joy, thank you so much. I do have an eye on the time, and I know we started a little late, so thanks to the audience for bearing with us. Maybe if there are no more questions, Mitalidi, from our YouTube chat box, I'm going to try and bring this to a wrap with one quick question, because we cannot not talk about this, Joy. You've touched on Ray's humanism and his rationalism, and we've had this discussion a couple of weeks ago. Would you take this opportunity to talk to us a little bit about Ray's portrayal of caste in his works?
Oh boy. Yeah, this is a neglected part of Ray. Ray is often deemed as an apolitical filmmaker. And I find this very surprising because Ray's politics is so evident. You cannot make a film like Devi if you're apolitical, because you are directly attacking the dogmatism and superstition and traditionalism which brings our society down so many notches. Ray in Mahanagar brings emancipation so aesthetically and evocatively, cinematically. I have not seen films on Indian films on female emancipation done so evocatively as I saw in Mahanagar. And there is no animosity. It was not a clash of feminism versus patriarchy directly. The feminism just emerges in his own way. And somewhere the man comes down from the patriarchal pedestal, holds the hand of the feminist and walks. And he becomes a quasi-feminist at the end of the film in a way where they go down the lane in the city, pursuing their common dreams together in a comradeship. The woman is grown now. The woman has elevated herself, gone much beyond this man who is stuck within his tradition. So now the man has to elevate himself. And we see that at the end of film in Mahanagar. As I already touched upon his city films, Jono Oronno, Protidwandi and The Company Limited. These are films on class conflict. Have no doubt about it. 3 films directly on class conflict. And the caste conflict, well, tell me another film on caste conflict which is better nuanced than Shodgoti. It is, I would say this is one film of Ray which is on your face. The demonic aspects of Brahmanism, the complete inhuman elements which are carried on the shoulder of traditionalism is exposed by Ray in a short film. In a short film of 26 minutes, Ray completely exposes the underbelly of the Brahmanical tyranny. Tyranny, I use the word tyranny. I'm not talking about some soothing, suitable caste dynamics being explored, but tyranny. He tears it apart in Shodgoti. And I couldn't be happier because he tears apart this whole dichotomy of people saying that, Ray is an apolitical filmmaker. No, he's not. He's political.
Thanks, Joy. Thank you so much. And I know questions are coming in. on YouTube, but unfortunately, I have an eye on the time. We won't be able to take all of them, but I assure you we will forward them to Joy. Joy, thank you once again, for starting this conversation today on this brilliantly engaging note, enriching note. Thank you for sharing your thoughts with us, and hopefully we're going to see you soon outside of these little boxes and screens, and I hope we can have you over in person in the college, not only to talk about Ray, but to also experience a little bit of the theater that you carry with you everywhere. Thank you so much, Joy. Very honored to have you with us today.
Bye.
I will now, we shall now move on to our next speaker, Professor Nilanjan Sengupta. And I would once again like to remind our audience that we will be taking questions for this session as well on the Google Meet chat box and the YouTube live chat box. I shall now invite my colleague, Dr. Amita Majumdar, to introduce Professor Sengupta. And thank you, Dr. Mitali Dasgupta, for coordinating the questions from the chat box for the previous session. Over to you, Amita.
Thank you, Somrita. Good afternoon. প্রথম পর্বে শ্রী জয় সেনগুপ্তর অসম্ভব সুন্দর প্রেজেন্টেশনের পরে আমরা এখন শুরু করতে চলেছি আমাদের দ্বিতীয় পর্বের অনুষ্ঠান। এই পর্বে আজ আমাদের সাথে উপস্থিত রয়েছেন শিবপুর দীনবন্ধু ইনস্টিটিউশন কলেজের অর্থনীতির অধ্যাপক শ্রী নীলাঞ্জন সেনগুপ্ত। স্বাগত নীলাঞ্জন। নীলাঞ্জন সেনগুপ্ত আজ এখানে তার বক্তব্য রাখবেন ঠিকই, কিন্তু আজ তার বক্তব্যের ভাষা হলো তার নিজের হাতে আঁকা কিছু ছবি। তার এই উপস্থাপনাকে সত্যজিৎ রায়ের প্রতি তার শ্রদ্ধার্ঘ্য মনে করে আমরা নাম দিয়েছি ফিরে দেখা সত্যজিৎ। আসলে সত্যজিৎ রায়ের সিনেমা, গল্প ও ছবি আঁকার একনিষ্ঠ ভক্ত নীলাঞ্জনের আঁকা ছবির অধিকাংশই জুড়ে রয়েছে সত্যজিৎ রায়ের প্রতিকৃতি এবং চলচ্চিত্রে তার সৃষ্ট চরিত্রের কিছু ছবি। তাই আজকের এই উপস্থাপনা অনেকটাই প্রাসঙ্গিক হবে বলে আমাদের বিশ্বাস। ছবিগুলো দেখানোর আগে নীলাঞ্জনের সম্পর্কে দু একটা কথা বলে নেওয়া প্রয়োজন। অনেক ছোটবেলা থেকেই তিনি ছবি আঁকতে শুরু করেন নিজের আগ্রহে, কিন্তু এই ছবি আঁকা যেন তার ছবি আঁকার নেশা যেন তার পেশা না হয়ে দাঁড়ায়, সেই জন্য তিনি কোনো প্রশিক্ষণ পাননি। এরপরে স্কুল, কলেজ, ইউনিভার্সিটিতে বন্ধুদের প্রতিকৃতি, ক্লাসে টিচারদের স্কেচ ইত্যাদি বিভিন্ন কার্টুন এসব আঁকাতে উনি বিশেষ দক্ষতার পরিচয় দেন। এভাবেই অধ্যাপনার পাশাপাশি ছবি আঁকার নেশা তাকে এগিয়ে নিয়ে যেতে সাহায্য করে। আমি আর বেশি সময় নেব না, কারণ আমাদের সময় ভীষণ সীমিত। এরপরে আমাদের আরো একজন বক্তা আছেন যার বক্তব্য শোনার জন্য আমরা সকলেই ভীষণ আগ্রহী। তাই নীলাঞ্জনকে অনুরোধ করব তার আঁকা ছবি আমাদের সামনে তুলে ধরার জন্য। শুরু করছি ফিরে দেখা সত্যজিৎ।
নমস্কার। একটা কথা বলে নি প্রথমেই, অমিতাদি তো আমার সম্পর্কে বলেছেন। আমি অ্যাকচুয়ালি অর্থনীতির শিক্ষক হিসেবে যতটা না পরিচিত, আঁকিয়ে হিসেবে বোধহয় তার থেকে বেশি। তো আমি একটা জিনিস বলে নিই যে আমি কিন্তু একেবারেই সত্যজিৎ বিশেষজ্ঞ নই। আমি বলতে পারেন আপনাদের সবার মতোই সত্যজিৎ ভক্ত। তার নানা রকম গুণের গুণমুগ্ধ বলতে পারেন। আমি ছবি আঁকতে ভালোবাসি এবং গত 2 বছরে অতিমারির দৌলতে বেশ কিছুটা অবসর সময় পাওয়ার ফলে আমি প্রচুর ছবি এঁকেছি এবং তার মধ্যে বেশ কিছু ছবি হচ্ছে সত্যজিৎ রায়ের নিজের ছবি এবং সত্যজিৎ রায়ের বিভিন্ন সিনেমাতে যে চরিত্রগুলি ছিল আমরা দেখতে পাই সেইগুলির পোর্ট্রেট বা প্রতিকৃতি। আমি মূলত মানুষের ছবি আঁকতেই বেশি স্বাচ্ছন্দ্য বোধ করি। তো সেই ছবিগুলো আপনাদের সাথে আজকে ভাগ করে নেব। অবশ্যই আমি এই ছবিগুলো এই ওয়েবিনারে দেখানোর সুযোগ পাচ্ছি বলে মনীন্দ্র চন্দ্র কলেজের কর্তৃপক্ষকে আমার কৃতজ্ঞতা এবং ধন্যবাদ জানাচ্ছি। আমি আর আমার বক্তব্য দীর্ঘায়িত করছি না, আমার হয়তো আমার ছবি কথা বলবে, আমি ছবিগুলো দেখানো শুরু করছি পরপর। আন্তর্জাতিক চলচ্চিত্র জগতে সত্যজিৎ রায় একটি বড় নাম। তাই আর প্রতিকৃতি দিয়েই আমি আমার প্রদর্শনী শুরু করছি। এই ছবিটি চারকোলে আঁকা এবং যে সময় অপুর ট্রিলজি মানে পথের পাঁচালী 1955 সালে মুক্তি পেয়েছিল, সেই সময়ের যে তরুণ বা যুবক সত্যজিৎ, সেই সময়ের এই ছবিটি আমরা দেখতে পাচ্ছি। তো যেহেতু প্রথম তার আন্তর্জাতিক খ্যাতি এনে দিয়েছিল পথের পাঁচালী, সেই সিনেমার কয়েকটি ছবি দিয়ে আমি প্রথম অংশটা দেখাচ্ছি। এটি আপনারা সবাই চেনেন, অপূর্ব অর্থে কিশোর অপুর ছবি। সুবীর বন্দ্যোপাধ্যায় এই ভূমিকায় অভিনয় করেছিল। সেই অনুসন্ধিৎসু চোখ এবং অচেনাকে চেনার, অজানাকে জানার যে আগ্রহের ব্যাখ্যা আমরা বিভূতিভূষণ বন্দ্যোপাধ্যায়ের বইতে পাই, সেটি আমরা এই চোখটাতে দেখতে পাচ্ছি। এটি অপুর আরেকটি ছবি, এটাও ওই নিশ্চিন্দপুর গ্রামে যেখানে অপুর কিশোর বেলা কেটেছিল সেই সময়কার ছবি। অবশ্যই তারপরে আসছে অপুর দিদি দুর্গা। উমা দাশগুপ্ত এই ভূমিকায় অভিনয় করেছিলেন এবং এই ছবিটাতে দুর্গাকে দেখা যাচ্ছে তার বাড়ির পাঁচিল থেকে উঁকি মারছে, কারণ বাড়িতে প্রতিবেশীরা এসছে, মাকে নালিশ করছে যে দুর্গা তাদের কাছে থেকে পেয়ারা চুরি করেছে। এটি দুর্গার আরেকটি ছবি, এটাও চারকোল পেন, বেশিরভাগ স্কেচই চারকোল পেন্সিলে এবং গ্রাফাইট পেন্সিলের সাহায্যে করা। এই ছবিটি কিন্তু তার অপু দুর্গার যে পিসি আমরা দেখতে পাই ইন্দি ঠাকুরুন, তার মৃত্যুর পর দুর্গার যে গৃহপাল চাহনি সেটা এই দৃষ্টিতে ধরা পড়ে। তারপরেই আসছে সেই বিখ্যাত ইন্দি ঠাকুরুন অর্থাৎ চুনিবালা দেবী, যিনি অভিনয় করেছিলেন। একে দেখলেই বোধহয় সেই গানটি মনে পড়ে যে হরিদিন তো গেল সন্ধ্যা হলো পার করো আমারে, আর সেই ডাক ও নতুন বউ। এরপরে আসছে অপুর ছেলেবেলায় একদম প্রথম দিন পাঠশালা যাওয়ার সময় তার দিদি যত্ন করে তার চুল আঁচড়ে দিচ্ছে এবং আমরা দেখতে পাচ্ছি সর্বজয়া অর্থাৎ অপুর মায়ের মমতা মাখানো চাউনি করুণা বন্দ্যোপাধ্যায় অভিনয়টি করেছিলেন। এটি আমার খুব প্রিয় একটি দৃশ্য। এর পরের দৃশ্যটি কিন্তু পথের পাঁচালী ছবির একদম শেষ দৃশ্য, খুবই মর্মস্পর্শী। দুর্গার মৃত্যু তখন হয়ে গেছে এবং হরিহর তার স্ত্রী পুত্রকে নিয়ে কাশী রওনা দিচ্ছেন। দৃষ্টিতে আমরা দেখতে পাচ্ছি তিনজনের দৃষ্টিতে একটা শূন্যতা, ভিটে মাটি ছেড়ে যাওয়ার বেদনা এবং দুর্গাকে হারানোর যে বেদনা, এটা তাদের চোখে ধরা পড়ছে। পথের পাঁচালী শেষ করে আমরা তার পরের বছরই 1956 সালে মুক্তি পেয়েছিল যে অপরাজিত, সেটি দেখছি। এই ছবির প্রথমার্ধ তো কেটেছিল কাশীতে, পরবর্তীকালে দেওয়ানপুর নামক একটি গ্রামে এবং শেষ পর্যন্ত কলকাতায় অপু পদার্পণ করে। সেই ছবিটি আমি তুলে ধরার চেষ্টা করেছি এবং এটিতে আমি কিন্তু পেন্সিল স্কেচ নয়, এটি জেল পেনে পুরোপুরি স্কেচ করা। কিছুটা সত্যজিৎ রায়ের অঙ্কন শৈলী অনুকরণ করে আমি আঁকার চেষ্টা করেছি। হ্যারিসন রোডে রয়্যাল প্রেসের সামনে অপু দাঁড়িয়ে আছে সুটকেসের ওপর, সেই গ্লোবটি এবং বগল দাবা করে তার বিছানাপত্র নিয়ে দাঁড়িয়ে আছে। এই ভূমিকাটি পালন করেছিলেন পিনাকি সেনগুপ্ত। এরপরে অপুর সংসার 1959 সালে হয়েছিল, আমার খুব প্রিয় ছবি। তাই এই ছবির অনেকগুলো দৃশ্য আমি পেন্সিলে তুলে ধরার চেষ্টা করেছি। হঠাৎ করে বিয়ে হয়ে যায় অপূর্ব এবং অপর্ণা। রেল লাইনের ধারে সেই পুরনো বাড়ির সিলেকোঠার ঘরে বউকে নিয়ে তোলার পর অপূর্ব যখন প্রশ্ন করে, তোমার খুব খারাপ লাগছে না? অপর্ণা তখন বলেন, না। সত্যি বলছো? সেই মুহূর্তটাকে আমি ধরার চেষ্টা করছি। এই ছবিতে অপর্ণাকে ইংরেজি শেখানো হচ্ছে এবং দৃশ্যটি মনে করতে পারেন আপনারা। অপূর্ব বলছে সিএটি ক্যাট, এফএটি র্যাট, আর এটি র্যাট ইত্যাদি। এটিও খুব বিখ্যাত দৃশ্য। অ্যাকচুয়ালি এর আগের দৃশ্যটা দেখিনি আমি। এটা হচ্ছে অভিমানী অপু, যেখানে জিজ্ঞেস করা হচ্ছে, অপর্ণা তোমার অনুশোচনা হয় না? তোমার নিশ্চয়ই আশ্বাস হয়, আমায় বলো না। অপর্ণা যখন বলে, তা হয় বই কি, যেমন পায়ের উপর পা দিয়ে বসে থাকতে পারতাম। তখন অপূর্বর সেই অভিমানী উক্তি, চললুম ঝিয়ের খোঁজ করতে। তারপরে এই দৃশ্য, অপূর্বর কাঁধে মাথা রেখে অপর্ণা জিজ্ঞেস করছে, ঝিয়ের মাইনে দেবে কে? অপূর্ব বলছে, আর একটা টিউশনই নেব। অপর্ণা বলছে, তাহলে আমায় বাপের বাড়ি দিয়ে এসো। অপর্ণাকে আমরা শেষ দেখতে পাই এই দৃশ্যটিতে, একটি গাড়ির ভিতর। অপূর্ব যখন সিগারেট ধরানোর জন্য দেশলাই কাঠি জেলে দিতে বলছে, সেই দেশলাই কাঠির আলোতে আমরা অপর্ণার মুখটা দেখতে পাই। এবং সেখানে অপূর্ব প্রশ্ন, আচ্ছা তোমার চোখে কি আছে বলতো? তখন অপর্ণা বলে, কাজল, বলে দেশলাই কাঠিতে ফুঁ দেয়। এটি খুব প্রতীকী দৃশ্য, কারণ জীবন প্রদীপ তখন কিন্তু নিভে যায় এবং ছেলের নাম হয় কাজল। এরপরেরটি আমরা দেখতে পাচ্ছি স্ত্রীর মৃত্যুর পর অত্যন্ত কাতর, উদ্ভ্রান্ত, দিশাহীন, বিবাগী অপু। এর পরের দৃশ্যেই অপু তার যত্ন করে লেখা গল্পগুলি, উপন্যাসগুলি, যেটি তিনি অপর্ণাকে উৎসর্গ করবেন বলেছিলেন, সেগুলোকে হাওয়ায় উড়িয়ে দিচ্ছেন। এরপরে মামার বাড়িতে মানুষ হওয়া ছেলেকে আনতে যাচ্ছে অপু, ছেলের সঙ্গে ভাব করতে ব্যর্থ। অপূর্ব যখন চলে যেতে যেতে একবার কি মনে হলো, তার পিছন ফিরে তাকালো, তখন সে কাজলকে দেখতে পেল। এই দৃশ্যটি কিন্তু অপুর সংসার ছবির শেষ দৃশ্য এবং আমার অত্যন্ত প্রিয় দৃশ্যগুলোর মধ্যে একটি, যে কারণে আমি খুব ভালোবেসে এই ছবিটি এঁকেছি। আপনাদেরও নিশ্চয়ই খুব ভালো লাগে। ছেলেকে কাঁধে চাপিয়ে বাবার সেই অতুলনীয় হাসি, দুনিয়া জয় করার মতো হাসি, যা আমাদের চোখে জল এনে দেয়। এরপরে আমি সেই মহান মানুষটির আরেকটি চারকোল স্কেচ আপনাদের দেখাচ্ছি। সত্যজিতের মহান কৃতিগুলোর মধ্যে যদি আমরা জনপ্রিয়তার নিরিখে বিচার করি, তাহলে হয়তো 1 নম্বরে আসবে গুপি গায়েন বাঘা বাইন ছবিটি, যেটি 1968 সালে মুক্তি পায়। এই ছবিতে যে যুদ্ধ বিরোধী বার্তা দেওয়া হয়েছিল মজার ছলে, তা কিন্তু আজও একই রকম প্রাসঙ্গিক। জয়দার বক্তব্যে আপনারা এগুলো শুনেছেন। আমি গুপি বাঘার একটি গান ছোট্ট করে আপনাদের শোনাচ্ছি। ও রে হল্লা রাজার সেনা, তোরা যুদ্ধ করে করবি কি তা বল, মিথ্যে অস্ত্র শস্ত্র ধরে প্রাণটা কেন যাইবে ভরে, রাজ্যে রাজ্যে পরস্পরে দ্বন্দ্বে অমঙ্গল, তোরা যুদ্ধ করে করবি কি তা বল। গুগা বাবা সিরিজের দ্বিতীয় ছবি হীরক রাজার দেশে স্বৈরাচারী রাজার ভূমিকায় উৎপল দত্ত এক কথায় অনন্য, অতুলনীয়। সে কারণে আমি এই ছবিটি খুব মন দিয়ে চারকোল দিয়ে স্কেচ করেছিলাম। ছবিটি দেখলেই কেমন যেন কানে বাজে না? এরা যত বেশি পড়ে, তত বেশি জানে, তত কম মানে। কথাগুলো এখন তো আপনারাও নিশ্চয়ই হাড়ে হাড়ে অনুভব করেন, তাই না? উদয়ন পণ্ডিতের ভূমিকায় সৌমিত্র চট্টোপাধ্যায়, যাকে দেখলেই মনে পড়ে জয়দা এক্ষুনি যেটা বললেন, দড়ি ধরে মারো টান, রাজা হবে খান খান। অর্থাৎ রাজতন্ত্রের অবসান ঘটানোর জন্য আহ্বান এবং লোকতন্ত্রকে আহ্বান করা। তোমার নাম কি? একে চরণ দাস। যতদিন গান ততদিন প্রাণ, গান শেষ তো জানো শেষ। কই দেখি তুমি গান গাও তো। কতই রঙ্গ দেখি দুনিয়ায়, ও ভাই রে ও ভাই, কতই রঙ্গ দেখি দুনিয়ায়, আমি যেই দিকেতে চাই দেখে অবাক বনে যাই, আমি অর্থ কোনো খুঁজে নাহি পাই রে, ও ভাই অর্থ কোনো খুঁজে নাহি পাই রে, ভাই রে ভাই রে, কতই রঙ্গ দেখি দুনিয়ায়, দেখো ভালো জনে রইল ভাঙা ঘরে, আর মন্দ যে সে সিংহাসনে চড়ে, ও ভাই সোনার ফসল ফলায় যে তার দুই বেলা জোটে না, আহার হীরার খনির মজুর হয়েও কানা করি নাই, ওরে ভাই রে, ওরে ভাই রে, ভাই রে, কতই রঙ্গ দেখি দুনিয়ায়। এরপরে সেই চোখ একে বেঁধে ফেল, একে ধরে নিয়ে যাও অন্তর মন্তর করে। একটি গুপির আমার খুব প্রিয় চরিত্র, এই যে স্কেচটি করেছি জেল পেন দিয়ে, এটা কিন্তু পুরোটাই ডটের সাহায্যে। দেখুন মুখের যে শেডিং গুলো আমি করেছি, এটা কিন্তু কোনো পেন্সিলের সাহায্যে নয়, পুরোটাই জেল পেন দিয়ে, ডট দিয়ে। গুপিগায়ন বাঘাবাইন এবং হীরক রাজার দেশের পর আমার সব থেকে প্রিয় ছবি হচ্ছে সোনার কেল্লা, যা 1974 সালে প্রকাশিত হয়। তখন আমার 2.5-3 বছর বয়স। এই ছবিটি দেখেই সত্যজিতের প্রতি আমার প্রথম অনুরাগ তৈরি হয়েছিল। মুকুলের সেই গম্ভীর মুখের ছবি, যখন সে রাত দিন ছবি আঁকে আর কি, তখন খবরের কাগজের লোক যখন ছবি তুলতে এসছে, একটু হাসো তো খোকা, মুকুলের জবাব, আমার হাসি পাচ্ছে না। এই ফেলুদার সেই পরিচিত বইঠিকখানার স্কেচ করেছিলাম, এটাও সত্যজিৎ রায়ের স্টাইল ফলো করে। সত্যজিতের বিভিন্ন ফেলুদার গল্পে যেরকম স্টাইলে উনি স্কেচ করেছিলেন, সেগুলো ছোটবেলায় একদম গিলতাম চোখ দিয়ে, সেগুলোই চেষ্টা করেছি পরবর্তীকালে নিজে আঁকতে। এখানে আমরা দেখতে পাচ্ছি মুকুলের বাবা ফেলুদার সঙ্গে দেখা করতে গেছেন, তোপসে নোটস নিচ্ছে। আরেকটি জেল পেনের স্কেচ, এই সেই দুই মূর্তিমানের ভবানন্দ এবং তার চালা, অর্থাৎ মন্দার বসরূপী সেই কামু মুখার্জিকে এবং অজয় ব্যানার্জিকে আমরা দেখতে পাচ্ছি। আমাদের সকলের প্রিয় জটায়ু, অর্থাৎ লালমোহন গাঙ্গুলির ভূমিকায় একমাদ্বিতীয়ম সন্তোষ দত্ত। এখানে আমরা দেখতে পাচ্ছি নেপাল কা অস্ত্র, জং বাহাদুর রানার অস্ত্র হাতে। এই ছবিটি, এটাও জেল পেন স্কেচ, সিধু জাঠার বৈঠকখানায় ফেলুদা ও তোপসে। যখন সিধু জাঠা ফেলুদাকে পরীক্ষা নিচ্ছে যে উইলিয়াম জেমস হার্শেল কে ছিলেন, ফেলুদা সঠিক উত্তর দিচ্ছে, তখন খুশি হয়ে সিধু জাঠা হাত মেলাচ্ছে, বাহ বাহ বাহ, দেখি তোমার আঙুলগুলো, জিতে রাহো বাচ্চে। এরপরে আমরা চলে যাচ্ছি নায়ক সিনেমায়, যেটা 1966 সালে মুক্তি পেয়েছিল। মহানায়ক উত্তম কুমার, অবশ্যই আপনারা সবাই দেখেছেন, তার ছবিটি এঁকেছি। এটিও এই সিনেমাতে শর্মিলা ঠাকুর এবং উত্তম কুমারের ট্রেনের মধ্যে কথোপকথন। এই ছবিটির বিশেষত্ব, মানে আমার আঁকা ছবিটির বিশেষত্ব হলো শুধুমাত্র চুলের স্টাইল পিছন থেকে দেখে যাতে মানুষটিকে চেনা যায়। ওই ছবিতেই কামু মুখোপাধ্যায়ের ছবি। কামু মুখোপাধ্যায় কিন্তু সত্যজিৎ রায়ের অত্যন্ত কাছের একজন মানুষ ছিলেন এবং অসাধারণ অভিনয় করেছেন নানা ছবিতে। এটিও সত্যজিৎ রায়ের আরেকটি স্কেচ, এটিও পেনের আঁচড়েই করা। চারুলতার ছবিতে দূরবীন হাতে মাধবী মুখোপাধ্যায়, নষ্টনীর গল্প নিয়ে সেই দূরবীন হাতে চারুলতা, 1964 সালের ছবি। জলছাপার ছবিটি অনেক আগে 1958 সালে মুক্তি পায়। এখানে আমরা দেখতে পাচ্ছি জমিদার বিশ্বম্ভর রায়ের ভূমিকায় ছবি বিশ্বাস, তারাশঙ্কর রায়ের গল্প উপলক্ষে। এখানে ওই সেই বাইজির নাচের পর যেখানে মহিম পকেট থেকে পয়সা বার করছে ইনাম দেওয়ার জন্য, সঙ্গে সঙ্গে ওই লাঠি দিয়ে তার হাতটা টেনে ধরে বলছে, প্রথম ইনাম দেওয়ার অধিকার গৃহস্বামী, গায়ে কাঁটা দেয়। এই ছবিটাও সত্যজিৎ এই জেল পেনের আঁচড়ে আঁকা। এবং এই যে ছবি বিশ্বাসের ছবিটা আমরা দেখতে পাচ্ছি, এখানে ডায়লগটি মনে করুন, বলছে চাকরকে, পারেনি পারেনি, কেন পারেনি জানিস? রক্ত, ব্লাড, দ্য ব্লাড ইন মাই ভেইনস, অর্থাৎ আভিজাত্যের যে আত্মাভিমান, সেটা এটা প্রকাশ পায়। আজ থেকে 60 বছর আগে তিন কন্যা ছবিটি মুক্তি পেয়েছিল, পোস্টমাস্টার, মণিহারা এবং সমাপ্তি, তিনটি ছবির সমাহার। এটি সমাপ্তি ছবিতে কিশোরী অপর্ণা সেন একরোখা, ডান পিঠে এক কিশোরী। অরণ্যের দিন রাত্রি আমার অত্যন্ত প্রিয় আরেকটি ছবি, 1969 সালে মুক্তি পেয়েছিল। এখানে আমরা বিখ্যাত সেই মেমারি গেমের দৃশ্যে শর্মিলা ঠাকুরকে দেখতে পাচ্ছি। ওই ছবিতেই সাঁওতাল রমণীর ভূমিকায়, দুলির ভূমিকায় সিমি গারওয়াল অসাধারণ একটি ভূমিকা উনি পালন করেছিলেন, সেটি আমি এঁকেছি, খুব আমার প্রিয় ছবি। সত্যজিতের শেষ ছবি আগন্তুক প্রকাশ পায় 1991 সালে, তার প্রয়াণের 1 বছর আগে। সেই ছবিতে আমরা মমতা শঙ্করকে দেখতে পাচ্ছি, যেখানে তিনি সেই বিদেশ থেকে আসা মানুষটি তার ছোট মামা সত্যিই কিনা সে নিয়ে দ্বিধায় রয়েছেন। এবার সেই মানুষটিকে দেখাচ্ছি আমরা মামার ভূমিকায় উৎপল দত্ত। এই স্কেচটিও পুরোপুরি জেল পেনে করা, এবং তার জন্মদিনে আমি এটি তাকে শ্রদ্ধা জ্ঞাপন করেছিলাম। চিড়িয়াখানা 1967 সালে মুক্তি পেয়েছিল। ব্যোমকেশ রূপী উত্তম কুমারকে আমরা দেখতে পাচ্ছি, কপালে গভীর চিন্তার ভাঁজ, এটি চারকোলে আঁকা। গোলাপ কলোনির রহস্য উদ্ঘাটনের জন্য তার কপালে ভাঁজ করছে। কাপুরুষ মহাপুরুষ ছবি দুটি হয়েছিল 1965 সালে। মহাপুরুষ অর্থাৎ গিরিঞ্চি বাবার ভূমিকায় চারু প্রকাশ ঘোষ। এখানে যে সংলাপটি ছিল, আপনি কি গৌতম বুদ্ধাকেও চিনতেন? উনি বলছেন, গৌতম গৌতম তো সেদিনকার ছেলে। আই নিউ দ্য বুদ্ধা when he was a ছোকরা। কাপুরুষ ছবিতে ব্যর্থ প্রেমিকার ভূমিকায় সৌমিত্র চট্টোপাধ্যায়। মহানগর ছবিতে অনিল চট্টোপাধ্যায়। গত বছর সত্যজিতের জন্ম শতবার্ষিকী পালন যখন শুরু হয়, সেই দিন আমি সত্যজিৎ রায়ের এই ছবিটি লিখেছিলাম। 1 মিনিট, আমার প্রদর্শনী এখনো শেষ হয়নি, অর্থাৎ শরবতটা খেয়ে নি। জয় বাবা ফেলুনাথ ছবিতে মগলনালের সেই বিখ্যাত ডায়লগ, বিখ্যাত উক্তি, অঙ্কল কোথায় যাবে? যখন তুই চলে যেতে চাইছি, এবার চালটা উঠা যাক, কোথায় যাবে? পহলে অর্জুন খেল দিখাবে তব তো যাবে। তারপর সেই বিখ্যাত ছুরির খেলা, অর্জুন, সেখানেও কিন্তু কামু মুখোপাধ্যায় এবং লালমোহন বাবুর সংজ্ঞা হারানো, এই দৃশ্য বলা যায় না। এতগুলো সাদা কালো ছবি দেখানোর পর এবার একটি রং পেন্সিলে আঁকা কালার ছবি। এই ছবিটি এই বছর সত্যজিৎ রায়ের জন্মদিনের দিন, অর্থাৎ যেদিন তার 100 বছরের পূর্ণ হলো জন্মের, সেই দিন এঁকেছিলাম। শেষ যে ছবিটি আপনাদের দেখাবো সেটি হলো ক্যানভাসে আমি অ্যাক্রিলিক রং দিয়ে করেছি। এটি সত্যজিতের, এটিতে কিন্তু দেখুন একটু খেয়াল করে মন দিয়ে, সত্যজিতের সব ছবির নাম কিন্তু এখানে দেখানো আছে, এবং যে অরিজিনাল ফন্ট তিনি ছবিতে ব্যবহার করেছিলেন সেটাই। পথের পাঁচালী, অপরাজিত, অপুর সংসার, পরশপাথর, জলসাগর, দেবী, 3 কন্যা। এটি আমার শেষ ছবি। স্বল্প সময়ের মধ্যে কিন্তু সমস্ত ছবি দেখানো সম্ভব নয়, আর আমি সব ছবির চিত্রায়ন করতে পারিও নি। যেটুকু করতে পারলাম আপনাদের সেটুকুই দেখালাম। আশা করি আমার এই উপস্থাপনা আপনাদের আনন্দ দিতে পেরেছে। ছবিগুলি মন দিয়ে দেখার জন্য সবাইকে ধন্যবাদ জানাই। আবারও অমিতাদিকে এবং মনীন্দ্র চন্দ্র কলেজের অধ্যক্ষ এবং অন্যান্য অধ্যাপিকাদের আমি কৃতজ্ঞতা জানাই আমাকে এই স্বল্প প্রদর্শনীটা করার সুযোগ দেওয়ার জন্য। ধন্যবাদ।
অসংখ্য ধন্যবাদ নীলাঞ্জন। এত সুন্দর একটি উপস্থাপনা, আমরা একেবারে স্পেলবাউন্ড। সত্যি শুধু ছবি নয়, গান, ছবি আঁকা, এমনকি সংলাপ, সব শুদ্ধ একটা কমপ্লিট প্যাকেজ। সুতরাং আমরা সত্যি গর্বিত তুমি আজ আমাদের মধ্যে এসে এইভাবে এত সুন্দরভাবে উপস্থাপনা করেছো। আর চ্যাট বক্সে আমি যেটা দেখতে পাচ্ছি, কোনো প্রশ্ন এখনো অব্দি আমরা পাইনি। তার একটা কারণ হতে পারে সকলেই এত মন দিয়ে ছবি দেখছিলেন।
একটা কারণ তো বটেই যে প্রদর্শনীতে আবার প্রশ্ন কি, মানে এই ছবিটি কেন এঁকেছেন, এটা তো কোনো প্রশ্ন হতে পারে না।
আমার একটা প্রশ্ন আছে।
নিশ্চয়ই।
আমি যেহেতু তুমি এই অধ্যাপনা লাইনে এবং ইকোনমিক্স পড়াও, সেই সূত্রে আমি তোমাকে চিনি। তো তুমি তো এত ভালো পড়ানোর পাশাপাশি এত সময় কোথায় পাও তুমি? কারণ এছাড়াও তো তুমি অনেক ছবি আঁকো, তাহলে এত অবসর কোথায় পাও যে এতটা কনসেন্ট্রেট করে এইভাবে তুমি?
আসলে নেশা তো যতই করবো না ভাবি এসে যায়। মানে ছবি পায়, যেমন খিদে পায়, তেষ্টা পায়, মিনাকি বাবু আরো ভালো বলতে পারবেন, ছবি কিন্তু পায়। আমার কিন্তু আঁকা পায়, যখন পায় তখন বসে পড়ি, 2 ঘন্টা 2.5 ঘন্টার মধ্যে একটা ছবি হয়ে যায়। এভাবেই কতটা পেরেছি জানি না, কিন্তু একে আমি আনন্দ পাই, লোককে আনন্দ দিতে পারি। আগে ছবি থাকতো, বাড়িতেই খাতার মধ্যে থেকে যেত, এখন হোয়াটসঅ্যাপ ফেসবুকের দৌলতে আপনাদের সাথে ভাগ করে নিতে পারছি, এটাই আমার সৌভাগ্য। ওই জন্য আরো বেশি বেশি করে অনুপ্রেরণা পাই, আরো ভালো করে ছবি আঁকার, আপনাদের দেখানোর। আমার মনে হয় সময় অতিক্রম করে যাচ্ছে।
ধন্যবাদ। আমরা পরে কোনোদিন, যদি আজ তো আমাদের টাইম কনস্ট্যান্ট রয়েছে, ফলে ভবিষ্যতে কোনোদিন যদি আমরা আরেকটু বড় করে কিছু করতে পারি, এর জন্য আমরা এখানে শেষ করছি। ওভার টু সমৃতা।
অসংখ্য ধন্যবাদ নীলাঞ্জন বাবু. Thank you so much, Amita Di, also for moderating this session. And as we can see from the comments, we haven't got too many questions, but the chat box is brimming with comments, even on the YouTube live stream. This was, I cannot speak enough about the transcendental power of your brush. Thank you so much, Professor Sengupta, for taking us on this synesthetic journey. In the interest of time, we will now move on to the final session of the day. I'm excited to hear Pinaki Das speak about Ray's work with the Signet Press. I shall now invite my colleague, Dr. Naina Dey, to introduce Dr. Pinaki Dey.
Thank you, Somrita. It is both a pleasure and a privilege to listen to our third speaker, Dr. Pinaki Dey, who is going to focus on Satyajit Ray's book covers and bookkeeping. But before that, of course, and I have to tell you that I have heard Pinaki a number of times, and he is absolutely brilliant. And I'm sure that the students are going to thoroughly enjoy his presentation. But before that, I have to do the formalities. I have to introduce him. Pinaki is a multiple award-winning graphic illustrator and designer who regularly works for renowned publishers like Penguin Random House, HarperCollins, Hachette, Routledge, Primus, Oxford University Press, Singapore University Press, Bloomsbury, Sage, Rowley, Sahitya Academy, Rupa, and many others. He has designed almost 500 book covers till date. He is the winner of Publishing Next Prize for the best book cover design in India twice in 2017 and 19. His book cover for Calcutta by Kunal Basu won the prestigious Oxford Bookstore Prize for the best cover design in India at Jaipur Literary Fest in 2017. His layout design on Satyajit Ray's archival manuscripts has drawn accolades from all across the globe. He's a Charles Wallace Trust Fellow, and his PhD was on comics theory. Pinaki is also one of the editors of the prestigious annual magazine Longform, published by HarperCollins 2018, which is generally regarded as the first global comics magazine from India. He is the Indian comics advisor of Mangasia, the biggest ever exhibition on Asian comics, curated by Paul Gravatt for the Barbican, London. His book-length comics on partition is due next year. Pinaki juggles his creative work with academics, as he has a day job as an associate professor of Raja Pyare Mohan College, Uttarpara. So I would welcome Pinaki to make his presentation.
Yeah. Am I audible, first of all?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. First of all, frankly, I haven't done much, but that's kind of a usual disclaimer that you give. One person who influenced me to do the book cover designs, to take up book cover designs, is basically Satyajit Ray. And unfortunately, I never met him when he was alive. There is backstory. I went to his house, wanted to give a portrait that I have drawn on him. But he was very ill then. He was actually in nursing home then. And then afterwards he passed away. But that missed opportunity I will do in all my life. Later on, I'm actually the member of Ray Society. Now I go to his house almost every week, at least a day. And, every day I go there, I feel that vibe in the room. If you enter the room, you feel the vibe. So today what I'll try to do is to talk about the book cover designs of Satyajit Ray. One of the problems that we have while talking about Ray is that we unnecessarily, almost deify him. We almost, make him godlike in the way he, did things and all. That's absolutely untrue. You have to understand Ray was actually, working in an environment which was already rich in a lot of stuff that was designed by equally talented men. And he learned a lot from them. So let me start from a convenient time, and that would be 1940s. So after 1940s, after he was doing his economics in Presidency University, his mother wanted him to practice, art. He originally wanted to do commercial art, but, the only avenue that he could find was to go to Shantiniketan, where commercial art as a subject was not available. So he actually admitted, he was admitted in the fine arts section. It was a 5 years course. And unfortunately, he could never finish the course. So from 1940 to 1942, so 2.5 years he was there. And then he actually left the course and came to Calcutta then, of course, back to work. But what he learned at Shantiniketan, for 2.5 years is extremely important. And as I show you the covers, you will see how much influence Shantiniketan had on Ray. First of all, you have to understand one thing. When he was in presidency, he was already going through the flea shops, in Free School Street. He was collecting gramophone records. He was looking at a lot of covers which were actually, there, published by foreign publishers. So he was mostly acquainted with the Western, canon of bookmaking. That was something that he was vaguely aware of, at least interested in. He was absolutely ignorant of the Indian form. It was only in Shantiniketan when he traveled there, when he came under the influence of his master Moshai, Nandalal Bosu, and of course Binod Bihari Mukhopadhyay, that he picked up the nuances of, Indian art. So what happened was, he also made friends with very important people there. Dinkar Kaushik, for example, Muthuswamy, all these people, who were extremely erudite persons, erudite about art, they also got acquainted with Ray. And, he also traveled to Ajanta, Ellora, Konark in order to study forms, various figures, Indian figures and forms. So that was something that was extremely, attractive to Ray, at least something that he never experienced before. Now, when he came to Calcutta, he was seeking work and he actually got work through a contact. His mother knew one D.K. Gupta, was basically the assistant manager of DJ Kima, an advertising agency. And what happened was, DJ Kima, he got an appointment in DJ Kima as a junior visualizer. Now you have to understand, he got appointment the same day as O.C. Ganguly, another great, I think we don't talk about O.C. Ganguly. He's brilliant as an advertising person, ad man. And they were all put under, the tutelage of Annoda Munshi, who is a maverick himself. There were other people there as well. Makhan Datta Gupta, who came and joined DJ Kima, and also, Kanu Boshu, who will actually be the young Turk in the advertising agency. So Ray, it's a fallacy to state that Ray was actually started something new. He was actually continuing a tradition that was already there. He was continuing something, whose, I think, base was already laid out by people like Annoda Munshi. And that is something that is very, very important to note. He never came out of a vacuum, actually. In fact, there are a lot of covers which are basically collaborations with many other people, but which we glibly state, today as only by Ray because he became famous afterwards. But that's untrue. Now, what did he do in the cover designs? What were the cover designs that he did there? the interesting thing that I want to talk about is most of us talk about cover designs, but we don't talk about the bookmaking part in which he was actively involved. Signet completely changed the bookmaking industry, and for that you need to praise D.K. Gupta, who was actually the assistant manager at DJ Kimmer, but simultaneously also started an imprint called Signet Press in 1943. So Ray joined Signet in 1943 as a book cover designer, and he was simultaneously working in DJ Kimmer, where he also joined in 1943. So it's only a gap of months where he was actually juggling between two works. So in DJ Kimmer, he was always, burdened by this sense of, catering to a public, demand. Advertising ultimately is aimed at a target audience where you need to be also at the, beck and call of the client. But as far as the book covers are concerned, he got a lot of creativity, and it is that creativity that, that set him going. Now, if you want to talk about Ray, the designer, you have to understand that there are many influences that comes in. For example, I always talk about the Bauhaus movement and the influence that had on Ray. And I tell it on evidence and I will talk about that. Now, let me show you some covers. I think it is always better to show some of the covers, some of the elements of bookmaking, and I'll try to analyze some of them and show how Ray was actually trying to, be out of the ordinary, want to create a new language of cover designs and bookmaking, as it were. Now, there is one thing that I want to show first, because, when Ray Ray was established as a cover designer, he was part of a huge exhibition in V&A, Victoria and Albert Museum in London. And that happened in 1949-50. And where Ray had 3 covers. It's called, it's actually curated by Charles Faulkner. It's one of the first exhibitions of its kind. And Ray got 3 covers. There were 4 covers from India, and Ray got 3 covers there. So he was basically, the one who represented India there, almost. I will show you the catalog there because I have the catalog. I got it from V&A. I will show you that. So let me share the screen. I think just tell me whether, just tell me whether this is visible. Is my screen visible?
No, not really.
Yes, no? It is. Yes, it is, Pinaki. Yes.
No, I need a bit of a confirmation here because this is something. Is it visible now? Yeah. Is it visible now?
Yeah, but it's a partial view that we are getting, Pinaki.
Now are you getting a better view?
No, what we are seeing are files. I
haven't presented yet. I'll just show you because I don't believe in this PowerPoint presentations because I find it a bit.
But it's not a full screen. We are getting a kind of.
Okay.
I think we are supposed to have it that way. Okay, let me. Yeah.
Okay.
But it's okay. I think it's.
No, let me show you this thing because I haven't.
You just show one picture, and I think.
Can you see this now? Is this full now? Just
let me check.
Yeah, Pinaki, it's on full screen.
It's okay.
It's working.
Yeah, it's working. Yes.
Okay. So remember the catalog of that, was actually, printed in black and white, and you can see Ferrari Forge by Premendra Mitra. Ferrari Forge, the collection of poems by Premendra Mitra. Don't confuse it with the play that happened later. Din Dupure, which is by Leela Mujumdar, and Indrani, which is by Achinta Kumar Sengupta. These 3 covers. There is another one whose origin we don't know who designed it. So basically, these 3 you can easily see that even Ray is acknowledged as a designer. So this is a very rare thing to see, the catalog of that exhibition. So you have to understand what was being created in Bengali during that time was really also very international. And that is something I always stress, while talking about Ray's book covers, because there is this international quality that Ray had, and all the Signet Press books had, which I think is something that you can always feel a bit, proud of. Let me talk about some of the covers. There are many covers. So what I'll do is I will try to show as many as I can, and just tell me whether you can view it full screen. Because can you view it full screen now? Is it?
Yeah, it's okay.
Okay, so
Yes,
this is a
absolutely.
cover which was actually a magazine cover. You can see a commemorative cover, again a rare cover. It's called Ordho Shatabdi, so it's half the decade. And if you look at it, Ray was fascinated by geometrical shapes, and that idea actually came from his exposure to Bauhaus. Bauhaus believed in this idea of what I call sharp edges and geometric shapes that can actually fill up the entire, what I call the white space of the cover, what we call the negative space of the cover. And you can see how he is also very careful in creating this sense of proportion with color, as well as with, the figure of, of what we called, inverted triangles, put together in a very interesting way. Look at the way Ray also breaks the convention of writing a book cover title, horizontally. He actually puts it vertically in keeping with the design of the book. This is basically not a book. It's basically a commemorative volume. Yeah, a book, but a commemorative volume. Look at again, the shape in Bohurupi. Bohurupi is, of course, his father's book, and it was reissued by Signet Press. And you can easily understand the same idea of geometrical repetition is actually used. And again, be very careful, of, reading, into this, because I will actually come back to it when I do the bookmaking part. And you will see even inside the book, he actually takes this imagery forward. I'm actually rushing a bit, because I need to show you more than, more the better. Look at the way he innovates with form and plays with the font. And this is almost unseen in Bengali covers before. So Bede, you can see the word Bede is actually written, but it is also a play of forms. You can actually, if you half close your eyes, you can make out a figure, and look at the way the looseness of the border plays. And, across, diagonally, you put a kind of a block in red where you actually try to write Bede in normal typeface. So what is very interesting in Ray is the way he plays both with form, with fonts, with calligraphy, as you will see later, and also with what I call the layout, the dimension of the page. Because whenever you face a cover, whenever you design a cover, you begin with a blank space. And, what is more important is what you leave out rather than what you fill things with. And this is actually an advice which I actually learned from Ray more than anybody else. Because it is easy to fill up things, but it is what you leave out as negative space that actually makes you a great designer. This is a very unique book. This is Shubho Thakur's book, Blue Blood Turned Red, Nil Rokto Lal Hoye Jay. So it's basically a translation. But here you can actually see, blue streaks of ink and the red streaks of ink, and together they form actually the portrait of Shubho Thakur. So this is basically the eye of Shubho Thakur and, the famous beard. And you can see that using what I call the scrolls on paper, okay, the inky scrolls on paper in red and blue, he is actually creating a portrait of the person whose autobiography this book is about. Next is Buro Angla. Again, you have play with geometric shapes. You can see Buro Angla here. Now, this is something that nobody could think of during that time, because most of the time you either have a simple cover, conveying very little, figuratively, or you actually have something more on the lines of what I call a conventional figurative drawing. Ray is breaking this convention, and if I surmise correctly, this idea is very Bauhaus. The very idea of reducing a figure to what I call geometrical blocks is something that is being taken up by other people as well, like Kanu Boshu, who will actually practice Bauhaus, almost directly, in DJ Kima. He was also, remember, he joined DJ Kima later. He actually took over as the art director after Ray resigned from DJ Kima. So again, this practice of, mixing Western art with influences from the Orient and the East was already there. And Ray is actually continuing a tradition. Probably he's doing it a bit better than a lot of other people, but he's part of a tradition. Okay. Next is Chalachitra. This is very unique. And if you remember Shonku cover later, he actually employs the same pixelated idea. But remember, he had no computer, no access to computer. This was done by hand, and it was actually done in a graph paper. And if you look at the original, it can be done in the graph paper. But look at the unique pixelated look, which is very common today, which you will probably employ computer graphics to do it, was actually done by hand by Ray. This is again a magazine cover, but later in one of the Shonku cover, you will see the same, idea being applied. This is Chalachitra, again a magazine cover, but look at the way he's trying to narrate a story. Of course, you have the figure of Chaplin, who is almost, a kind of an allegorical presence here. The other pictures with, short close-ups of heroes and heroines is actually holding this grid together. So you can actually find, if you think forward, you can think of 3 strips of, film strips, and the Chaplin figure in silhouette, almost like a shadow, trying to play, in various, figure actions, trying to, hold the cover together. This is very interesting. Chhatu Babu Chhata is one of his early covers. And if you look at the work, you have an influence of Escher. All of you must be aware of Escher, the geometrical, the isometric ideas that Escher was actually introducing in his drawings. And if you look at the umbrella at the background, you can see how the yellow background actually, becomes the yellow umbrella, and the white umbrella becomes the white background. So this very idea of application of Escher in a very, very, subdued way was also done by Ray in one of his covers. The same kind of repetitive cover. So you can see a kind of a signature in Ray. This is a cover which I really, really like, Din Dupure. And if you look at it, it's actually about it's about depicting the sunlight. But it does, and of course, the way it influences the, the private lives of people. Din Dupure is about that. But instead of going figurative, he actually uses, blocks, isometric blocks, to depict the interior of a house in a very abstract manner. I think these are the kind of covers that, Ray innovated on and made Signet a very different kind of, bookmaking company. This is Ferrari Forge, the cover which was there in the V&A gallery. And you can see, that influence of abstract, lines, and the way, the squares overlap each other. I'm actually reminded of Piet Mondrian when I see Ferrari Forge. And, Ray was actually aware of Mondrian. In fact, most of the book designers, I personally am a huge fan of Mondrian. Every book designer who is worth his salt, he knows Piet Mondrian inside out. And you can see how Ray applies Mondrian in such an innovative way. Look at the way, again, a figure here actually is used to create that sense of noise and chaos. So, it's a book called Hukka Hua by Shanta Devi. But look at the way the unconventional placement of fonts are actually used in order to create that sense of echo, that sense of, chaos, the sense of sound that is emanating from the cover. Of course, it's very difficult to, depict sound in a very interesting way, but Ray does it with Elam. This is Jhalapala. I'm skipping a bit, I'm just showing you things because there are so many things to show. I probably will not be able to show everything. This is Jonaki cover, which I find to be it's a brilliant cover, frankly, let me put it that way. Now, if you want to talk about Jonaki, you are only getting streaks of light, which actually depict Jonaki. But the very interesting thing is the way the background and the profile, of the figure, is played around in order to create that sense of geometrical symmetry. So the very idea, the illusion is to create that sense of, random movement that the fireflies make. But frankly, if you look at it, there is a sense of geometrical balance. If you look at the upper part and the lower part and the way the figure in the middle divides the cover across the vertical length, it actually makes sense how you actually can stack these, streaks in a certain way. This is a very interesting cover, Koral Kumbhir. This is a Jatayu cover. Of course, there was no book. This was shown in one of the films. Remember, Koral Kumbhir is a Jatayu cover. And this was created by Ray. There were other covers, which was Duranta Dushman, which was created by Moyuk Chaudhuri, and it was shown in a film. But this one was actually done by Ray. He actually did a cover only for 3 seconds in a film. This was shown maybe for 3 seconds or 4 seconds in a film, and he made a cover for that. So you can easily understand he was actually making a dummy, a real dummy, and he put a cover to it. He actually spent so much of time for that 3 seconds of, glory. You can see how meticulous he was. This is a cover which I really like, and this is a cover that has always been a favorite of mine, Khai Khai. And if you look at the way this is done, this may be a collaborative effort with Annoda Munshi as well. Many people have said to me that there is that, stylistic affinity to Annoda Munshi. But since it is only acknowledged as Satyajit's cover, we will only talk of it as Satyajit's cover. And you can look at the way, the figures are actually breaking off, the stacks of what I call horizontal lines. So all the figures, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, there are 5 horizontal, what I call line of people trying to eat. And, everywhere you can see there is a break of a person who is serving. And if you look at it, it is done in a particular way. One, in upper part, you have it on the right hand side. On the second one, you have it on the left hand side, and then you have this and there. So you can have a kind of a Z-like, line of vision, which directs you to the idea of what I call people eating and probably overeating. Okay, so Khai Khai, the way Khai and Khai are repeated, and the way the figures are repeated, they in a way almost metaphorically extend the title in a very interesting way. Okay, so this is Khirer Putul, again, a very common kind. You can easily understand that there is a lot of Rajasthani miniature element here. You can find some of it here. What I'm very interested is this book, Kumayuner Manush Kheko Bag, and here, of course, it's like a synecdoche. Remember, it's just you talk about the part in order to represent the whole. You only have the hide of the tiger, and you can see the bullet mark. And here, actually, Ray uses a very interesting trope, a very important scientific fact as well. The bullet, when it enters, makes a smaller hole. And when the bullet actually comes out, it comes out through a bigger hole. So the smaller hole nestles the title and the name of the author, while the bigger hole actually nestles the blurb. So you can see that diagonal placement, so you can only understand the cover if you actually spread it. Both the back cover, the spine, and the front cover is done together. This is actually a kind of an approach, a very holistic approach, which was never seen in Bengali covers before. I think people I think it's only Signet Press, and of course Ray spearheading it, who actually brought this into equation. Again, Kumir, you can see the same kind of geometrical referencing. This is a cover which is normally not seen, but this is actually a cover where Ray plays with perspective. And you can easily understand it's a very classical perspective thing. But look at the way he uses the print media, uses the what I call the limited palette to, create that sense of what I call, a kind of a visual, diagonal quality. The diagonal quality within the visual is something that is very, very interesting. It's a very classic perspective. The way we talk about perspective in Renaissance, he actually doesn't veer from that. And you can see the disappearing, line. You can see the point of disappearance as well, or at least being hinted at here. And this is something which I find to be very, very exciting. Again, look at this cover. This is actually, evocation of the sea waves, Nil Nirjan. You can easily understand. Look at the way the sea waves are created and the way the fonts are placed in certain way, which almost, is almost placed along the contour of the waves. And this is very, very exciting because I think as a cover, we always tend to the title in a big way. If you can see the cover from far, it will be a kind of a clutter breaker, which is not true. Okay, because there is no rule for any cover design. And, books by Ray actually shows that rule, being broken, every now and then. So you can see the way, all these things were placed in a certain way. He actually, first of all, remember Nil Nirjan, it is actually about alienation. So he actually separates all the, all the letters need John. So everybody is alone in its own way. They are placed separately. They are not together. So the very idea of alienation can be, evoked through very, innovative usage of font. This is Ponchoshor. Again, I don't want to explain this because this is a very, very common cover. This is Param Purush Sri Ramakrishna, which is a very famous cover as well. Here he almost imitates the Vaishnav Namaboli. It's kind of a decorative trope that he uses. But what I find this very interesting is the way that the spine and the cover is actually integrated. So if you look at the cover, it doesn't use what I call a very a kind of a middle composition. It uses a kind of a sideways composition where Param Purush Ramakrishna is actually put to one side and the blurb is put to one side. You could have easily put a square there and all the decorative elements across the square, around the square, but it refrains from doing so. So this breaking up of the what I call continuity in order to just spill it or let it spill over the edge or the bleed of the page actually gives you a sense of a continuum. This is a kind of a Namaboli which is also extending to a kind of a infinite, space. So this idea of spirituality that Ramakrishna evokes cannot be bound together. So what he does is he literally pushes everything out of the bleed of the page, or at least creates the illusion that not literally, metaphorically pushes the boundaries out of the page, the design out of the page, so that you can actually have a very interesting idea. Parapar, again, look at the way only a pen and paper and a bit of magic with hand can create that sense of amazing cover. Again, a very rare cover. You don't see these covers regularly now. I just hope people discover these more and more, because we tend to see some covers only by Ray. Look at this. This is Paschatya Darshaner Dhara, and he creates that rainbow because ultimately, there is no one, dhara within quote, where you can, as far as Western canon of philosophy is concerned. So in order to create that stack-like effect and that, varied links, he creates that with color. And look at the way the color is used in a very geometrical way. Very, very interesting. Look at this cover, which is Pratidhwani, where he is actually again creating sound through visual index. Look at the way the sound bars are placed and the way are separated again in order to, be discrete in their own standing and the way they play off each other. So they are almost like four notes that echo and play off each other. So that is something that is very, very exciting. Similar geometrical shape. Again, Tatar Samudra Dhara, similar Nourish Ghosh's work, similar geometrical shape. So these are, some of the works that you can see where you would see a lot of geometrical shape. Let me show you some stuff where you can see a lot of calligraphy, because I think Ray is also very famous for his calligraphy. I hope I'm not boring all of you. Am I boring people? I mean, honestly.
Absolutely. No, absolutely not.
Okay. Because
we are following you. We are following.
Yeah.
No,
because I want to keep it loose. I want to keep it a bit like a conversation.
Yeah, we are enjoying.
Because
I'm learning a lot of things. I mean.
Okay. Thank you. So this is Harendra Mohan Dasgupta's book, Studies in Western Influence. Look at his absolute fabulous English handwriting and calligraphy. This is raw calligraphy. He has done nothing. It's a blank paper and he has just written it in pen, and that's the cover. The kind of minimalism, the spare, the precision that he has in calligraphy is absolutely spellbinding. And here you can actually credit Nandalal a lot because, a lot of things he learned from using Chinese brush, and Japanese Chinese wash technique. And that actually helped him to develop his Bengali part calligraphy. It was not great, when he started, and he actually developed it, as he actually learned it down the way. Look at this again, Indrani. This is a very font-based cover, but look at the way the concentric circles of Hoshoi, Jontennoy, Doi, and Jontenno actually comes in handy. Later on, when you will see the Ekkon cover, you will see how you love to break off, the Ekkon into A, Kyomoy, Mudhanna, the way he will break up these letters in order to create, covers using the letters. So Indrani, in a way, was done much, much earlier. And you can see that what he already had in mind will be actually put in action later at Ekkon. This is Soumitra Chattopadhyay's poetry volume called Jolopropater Dhare. So you can actually see the way that Jolopropat, that is the waterfall, is evoked purely through calligraphy. Look at the way what I call the vertical movement of the brush is used. So he hasn't created a waterfall. He hasn't actually drawn a waterfall, but the very vertical movement of the brush and the volume of brush stroke actually gives you that sense of what I call vertical trajectory, and that makes it very, very interesting. This is Shudhich. This is Maku, a very interesting cover by Ray. This is of course Leela Majumdar's work, and it's meant for the children. And you can see the playfulness and the way, the maw and caw and the dot within actually becomes the eyes of a person who is looking over these, two girls running across. You are almost reminded of Pather Panchali in the running figures. But look at the way, the simplicity of the cover and the way you can use the font, the title, through calligraphy and make it so interesting. This is one of the greatest cover, I think, that Ray has produced, Orchestra. And again, you can see, this is done by paper cuts only. This is a cover done by paper cuts. And you can see how he's actually using small elements of the paper to actually create that sense of uniqueness. Orchestra is ultimately about gelling together, about everything coming together, but they are also made of discrete elements. So he's actually making everything discrete and trying to put it across in a very interesting, trajectory, in a very interesting way. So there is this, wave-like structure which he's trying to create through, separate elements that makes up the word orchestra in Bengali. Again, Abu Shahid Ayub's, volume, which is purely his handwriting. This is Podipishir Bormi Baksho, and you can see how he's actually creating the old archaic, Bormi Bakshos, which was very common during that time. This is Pore Ache Chandoner Chitas, wonderful, again, Soumitra Chattopadhyay's volume of poetry. And look at the way, the arrangement of the letters are done. The arrangement of the letters, you can actually, if you visualize it, if you half close your eyes, you can think that, Chita and Chandoner are actually forms the altar on which Pore Ache is written. So you have to think, this is a thinking man, trying to extend what is there in the book. The book cover becomes a text in itself, and that is what Ray wants to do. Okay. Let me show you some more. I don't know whether I will have time to show everything because I have so much, frankly. But maybe I will try to show you things that you haven't seen, because that's, I think, more important. This is the famous Amati Bhepur cover, which we are all acquainted with. So I'm not going to explain that. This is one cover which defies every conventional idea regarding cover making as far as the world, even global design is concerned. Look at the way, this is Achinta Kumar Sengupta's Amabosha, and you can easily understand this is done on dark paper, which is called black paper, on which he has done what I call the pastel art of this. There is shades of Rabindranath's painting here. You can easily understand that he is also paying almost tribute to the profiles of females that is drawn by Rabindranath here. But look at the way he's putting Achinta and Amabosha right by the side. It is as if, a real eclipse has taken place, because what you need to know is that out of darkness, this lady is emerging. The font is not important. The title is not important. And even if it is important, it is only important as a marginalia. This is a very, very interesting cover. Look at Antaranga again, Achinta Kumar's cover, where, he's using two colors in order to create that profile of a lady. This is Bishnu De's Naam Rekhechi Komol Gandhar, again, a brilliant cover. And you can understand the stylistic, affinity to Pottochitru, especially the Kalighat pot. You can actually find the Kalighat pot like this. But look at the way he has drawn it in black and white. It may be that it was due to financial, economics. He has to save money in order to do that. But even then, the very decision of going in black and white is actually elevating this cover completely on a different plane. This is the famous Chander Pahar, cover. But you can look at the way he has drawn. So it is not as if he couldn't draw. Of course, we all know that he could draw very well, better than a lot of people. But he always used to, the horses for the courses formula. He used that formula. So whatever the cover demands, he would be like that. He would be like a chameleon. He didn't have a signature style. It is only later that he developed a signature style when he began to write his own books, when he did cover for his own books. But when he did cover for others, when he did covers for Signet, he was actually looking at the language that the book has, the tonal quality of the book, and he's trying to formulate or reformulate him like that himself. This is the famous Charlie Chaplin cover of, again, the book is brilliant by Mrinal Sen, and this is the one done. This is Dragoner Nishas, Premendra Mitro, and look at the way, the limited color palette is never going to create, trouble in making this cover a standout. This is one cover which I like, Duronto Dupur, the kind of sensuality that oozes out of it. And, many people think that, go away from, avoid sensuality, overt display of sensuality, but this is not one. And you can see there are what I call shades of Matisse here. You can see the Matisse's drawings are almost like this, but look at the way, the face actually is, done in a different way. It's in a vertical orientation, in a horizontal orientation, while the whole figure is vertical. So what is important is the tension that is created on the direction of the face and the way the hand and the two hands, they're holding the cloth together. This is again a silhouette done by him. Nalok, look at this. You immediately remember the Jataka tales. You immediately remember the Ajanta paintings, the frescoes, and this is done intentionally like that. And again, you can look at the way, the figurative drawings are actually telling the story of the book, because ultimately a good decorative cover means nothing if you don't convey what is there within the book, because what is there inside, the content should actually dictate the way you do a cover. So sometimes only good looking covers are not enough. For Ramakrishna, for Param Purush Ramakrishna, that is a cover you see, he did a decorative cover. But for Sharada Muni, Prakriti Sharada Muni, he actually, did a very interesting portrait, and in a way, a very minimalist portrait. So again, you can see the way this is of course, Tuntuni's boy, Upendra Kishore, for which he did the cover. Of course, his great-grandfather was also a great cover designer. Let me also show you, and, two more things before I sign off and maybe take some questions, is that we talk about the covers, we forget that he was a great bookmaker. So most of us, I have most of the collection of the books, and if you look at what is inside the book, the title page, the verso page, and you will see how big he was about the look of the book. Because it is, cover is only one part of the book, okay? But there are other things within the book that are actually part of the bookmaking process. And look at Amity, this Amity you know, but look at Bonulata Sen, the famous cover that he did, which I haven't shown you. But look at the inside page. This is the title page of Bonulata Sen. Even there, he has actually, taken the imagery of what is there, outside, inside. Look at Bhodor Bahadur. This is the title page. These are not covers. These are the title page. But since I'm talking about the book, the tangible quality of the book in general, the materiality of the book, what is there inside was also designed by Ray. And remember, he was very meticulous in that. So it's important to talk about this. Look at Bohurupi, remember? I actually showed you the Bohurupi cover where that repetition of this chameleon was done. But here also, inside the page, the same thing is repeated. And it gives you a sense of, what I call aesthetic beauty, aesthetic sense of balance. This is Buro Angla, the inside title page, Dhushor Pandulipi. This is amazing. Now, he could have actually, be very decorative here, but he actually imitates the manuscript style in handwriting in order to just write Dhushor Pandulipi in a kind of a signature. It is as if, this is Jibananda Das's Dhushor Pandulipi, and it just uses this signature style in order to create that sense of manuscript. This is Duronto Dupur. I showed you the Matisse painting outside the cover, and this is the title page. This is Khirer Putul inside page. Orchestra. Look at this. So you have seen the orchestra cover, but inside, look at the way the choiref actually expands. Look at the way, he's actually taking the nuance of a title in order to depict something extra, pun intended. So what I'm trying to say is orchestra, the very expansion of choiref, is actually trying to, give you that sense of what I call Cambridge, the kind of, the community feeling that you have, the feeling of unity that you have, and the way, you can expand on a certain thing through different interplay of instruments. This is Premer Kobita. Okay, this is Podipishur Bormi Bashko. You have seen the cover. This is the inside. Bangladeshu inside page, not the first page. Look at Parapara. I have shown you the cover, and look at the way he has done Parapara again. This simple geometric shape, almost creating a labyrinth, and within which Parapar, and you actually separate the letters in order to create that is there. Look at Pratidhwani. You have seen Pratidhwani cover, and look at the way it's almost like a clock, or you can see it's almost toy hoshoi, jonten noy hoshoi. Toy hoshoi, we are very similar to each other, and the cognate poirofala and dhoi boy, which are cognates, which are almost mirroring each other. They are almost echoing each other. So it's also about intelligence. It's not only it's a visual language. Remember, you don't have to draw always. You have to be very intelligent in order to make these things happen. Raj Kahini is done very Rajasthani style. Look at Ruposhi Bangla, amazing. And there is this idea of question that comes in, that sense of mystery, and that actually becomes the red border of the sari that Jivanananda, the woman that Jivanananda's, that you talk about when you talk about Ruposhi Bangla and the woman of Jivanananda, the way he describes them. Of course, he represents Bengal as in a very complicated way. I'm not going to tell that, but the very idea of putting the red border as a question, almost like, drawing the face of the woman and not keeping it in mystery, but, the very idea of putting a question mark through the red border, makes it mystical. So sometimes you don't have to use, real visual index in order to depict something. You can actually use visual signifiers in order to create that sense of interesting. Look at this Sharat Chandrer Boithoki Golpo, and look at the way Boithoki, this is Boithoki, I can actually analyze how this is written, and the way the hookah is also depicted through words. Param Prakriti Sri Sri Sharada Muni, this was the verso page, this is the title page, sorry. This is Shilpayon, again Nandalal, Abanindranath's Shilpayon, and look at the way the very Nandalal, very, very Eastern style, very Khajuraho style, frieze that is drawn. A string called Jhonka. It's a very, very interesting example because look at the way the title is written and look at the way the Utsharga page is written. So there is this parity between title page and the Utsharga page. Okay? And you can easily understand the way he's trying to do that regularly. So you can see Prochotpato Protikriti Satyajit Ray. So every layout was done, and Prakashak was Dilip Kumar Gupta, as he was known, DK, everywhere. The last thing I want to show, and I hope I'm not overshooting, are the Ekon covers, which are, of course, I think legendary. All of you know them, but most of you haven't seen every one of them. And if you look at the Ekon cover, one thing that I'm writing a bit on this actually analytically, and I actually think is paying tribute to various art movements through the use of the word Kyomoi and Mudharna. So he separates those, and there is a basis on which this is separated. I don't have time to talk about that. There is a sound design principle behind the way he separates it. Look at the way the circular forms are there. So Ekhoner A, Mudharna, Kyomai, there are actually 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 circular forms if you pay attention. So if you look at Nandan logo as well, you will find the way he plays with circular form. Nandan logo, for your information, is designed by Ray. And then remember, there was a Nandan seal, which was actually designed by Nandalal Bose for Shantiniketan, and Nandan logo was designed by Satyajit. And you can see the similar play of circular forms, okay? The way he separates the circular forms and again reapplies it in a different way, almost recalibrates it. So this is actually something which is very close to constructivism. So you can see that he's paying tribute to many what I call art. And I'll give you an example. If you look at this, this is very Indian. This is very Indian. Look at this, for example. Okay, so this is like a kind of a rock painting. If you actually go and this is almost looking like a part of a rock, a very old rock edict. Okay, And the whole style is to, create that sense of, old Buddhist, frieze that you actually discover, across our country. So here he's almost paying tribute to the Buddhist art, old Buddhist art. Here he again goes back to constructivism, Bauhaus, a lot of Bauhaus elements are there. So it's as if he's paying tribute to every art movement. Look at this, for example. This is, for example, very Jackson Pollock-like, very abstract. And this is also Ekkhon. Can you get Ekkhon here? A, Kiyomai, and Mudhanna. So the way, the entire, the letters, this is very William Morris. If you notice William Morris and decorative art in Victorian age, there are shades of William Morris here and the wallpaper art that he developed. William Morris is known as a pre-Raphaelite to us, but he was a brilliant designer, one of the greatest designers England has ever produced. And this is almost a tribute to William Morris. Amazing. Look at the way A of, Ekkhon, the way this is done. I can go on, I can just go on and I can actually explain each and every art movement and the way. So this cover shows you the way it works. He has actually taken two vertical lines, A, Kiyomai, Mudhanna, all has, spine, vertical lines. And then he has actually separated, so Ekkhon also has a play on the word now. It is now, Ekkhon, right now, but it is also ak. So you can see ak playing out. Can you see ak, the letter ak? So, sometimes inverted. So sometimes inverted, sometimes, given in a similar way. So, this, of course, there are so many Ekkhon. This is very like Alpuna of Shantiniketan. Later on, there will be a poster on Oput Sangsar where he will actually almost use the same principle there. This is the basic principle. So you can understand the three lines that are there, the spines that are there, and the way he plays around with A and ak and the concentric circles that actually forms the basis of all the design. So this is Ekkhon, and there are so many covers. I haven't shown his own covers, but before I actually sign off, let me show you, and this is something that you never see anywhere. This is from the archives. I have actually asked permission from Shondipda to show you this. So this is the way he used to formulate his covers. We all do these doodles, we all do these drafts, and this is from the literary notebook, which is not published anywhere. This is the Vishwabharati Quarterly, the way he did it. Remember, he designed the Vishwabharati Quarterly, some issues of Vishwabharati Quarterly, and look at the way he's actually thinking of it, in a very different way. And the way he's actually playing along with the orientation, he's probably, doing it very casually, but even there you can see the finished nature of the work. So this is one I wanted to show you, and maybe there are three more I wanted to show. There are more basically. So this is Chitronatto, Moncho o Cholachitra Boishishte Trorimashik is written, and look at the way he's trying to develop the masthead of Chitronatto. For your information, the masthead of Desh and the first masthead of Anandamala and the Ajkal paper that you read are all all designed by Satyajit Ray, for your information. And logo designing is something that is huge. It needs, I think, 3-4 lectures in order to really explain what Ray is doing in logo design, because it is one thing to see and one thing to show, another thing to analyze, another thing to go into details of what he's trying to do. The very rational behind his thinking process, as far as we guess, using design principles. And this is the way, he used to, formulate his covers. Look at the way he is actually practicing sonnet, panchashot, o onnanno kobita. Look at the way he's practicing his calligraphy in order to, perfect it. Look at the way, this is, of course, Pramod Chaudhary's book. And look at the way he's actually trying to place it everywhere. He's trying to perfect the strokes in order to get the weightage, in order to get the swish, in order to get everything perfect. I really don't know. Do we have time? Do we have time? No. If we have time, I want to show you a very important. Do you have time, first of all?
Yeah, you can continue for another minute.
Okay, I think I've overshot, and I'm going hugely fast, But this is actually Hathekori, a book I really wanted to show you, because this is a book that is still, there, and we don't pay attention to this, but this is done by Satyajit Ray. It's almost like a primer. Remember when we use Sahajpat, we use the paintings of Nandolal. We forget how rich a tradition we have of primers. Of course, Tagore, if you know, had a lot of primers. He actually wrote, English primers, actually a lot of English primers, which we have completely consigned to history. Maybe more on that later. But, we use Nandalal's pictures as a reference in Sahaj Path, and it makes it more Sahaj, the very idea of using that line of cart, in Sahaj Path was a brilliant idea. Similarly, he actually did this work called Hate Kori, and this is actually the book, the cover of the book. It is shaped like a slate, and in it you can see, the way, a child will write, that is imitated. It's almost being imitated. Later on, if you see the titles of, say, Sonar and others, you can see the child writing being imitated by Ray in various ways, in very many ways. And look at the way he has used color here. And remember, there's a lot of things that you need to know here, because I'm not going to explain too much, but the problem is we now do full color print in a very easy way. This was done in block. And if you remember, the block printing has a lot of challenges. Putting colors was very, very difficult. The way we do grayscale, the way we calibrate color today without, even blinking an eyelid, it was not to be done then. And so people like Purnendu Potri, people like Prithvish Babu, people like Satyajit Ray and the other cover designers. And remember, Bengal has a brilliant tradition of cover designers. They used to be also they used to think of what would be the kind of block that can be used, frankly. Because if you don't have the idea of block and the way things will print out, the whole drawing would actually be rendered useless. So look at the way he uses color. Again, the colors are limited. It's not as if he uses a lot of color. So you can see a red color. You can see different gray scales, of course. And you can see the stunning use of green. These are the three colors. And of course, you have variations of black, which you can always do. And through that, he's creating this. I absolutely adore this book. It has been just reissued by Anando. If you get that, buy this. And, I would actually want all of you to inspire our children to grow with them. Because if they grow with them, I think we are very poor visually, frankly. Bengalis pride ourselves. We think that we are visually brilliant. They are great creators. But today, visually, we don't respond to things the way we should, because we respond to things visually, but that's mostly Western things. There are a lot of things that has been done in Bengal, in our place, using very little materials, which deserves mention, which you need your younger generation to savor and, really know. These are all brilliant drawings, of course. Look at the action. Look at the way, what I call the contour of the body, is being shaped. And the way the backgrounds are actually blended with color, with minimalist references. So when you actually use a jungle, for example, look at the giraffe and the jungle that is created, you use the foliage just by color, through green. And look at the way those foliage is not actually defined specifically, but in a very abstract way can, give you a sense of that jungle. So this is a book that I really look at this Dhonukdhari Ghurche Bhone. Look at this wonderful piece of art. If I actually separate that part, from others, you'll be flabbergasted how good it is. So this is one book that I always, love to talk about when I talk about Ray. I think it's a kind of a fitting finale. Of course, you cannot say the final word on Ray. Before I say the final word, and let me stop sharing. So let me stop sharing. One thing before I actually go and tell you the final word. I personally am a huge fan of Ray, but I don't like people, deifying Ray. Ray is part of a tradition. And this is something that you should all remember. It is not as if he's, emerging out of vacuum. We frequently use the word genius. He is a genius, but he was also surrounded by many geniuses. So when you talk about Ray, remember Subroto Mitra, Bongshi Chandragupta, they are mavericks themselves. It is a pity that, we don't even talk about them. Similarly, when we talk about Signet Press, about, book cover designs, there are people, when we talk about advertisements of Ray, which is again a very big subject, we know that there are people like O.C. Ganguly, there are people like Makhon Datta Gupta, there is Annoda Munshi, there is Kanu Bosu, who are equally important. So I would actually, advise you to look at that time, specifically. Look at the way, various art movements are blending together to create that unique language, that Bengali books are actually trying to have. So that's it for me. From me, I've actually overstepped the time limit. I really don't know whether I made sense. I actually rattled on everything very quickly, but the main purpose was not to, show myself off. It's mostly to show the covers of Ray and to see how good Ray was an artist, and also to be very careful while evaluating Ray. Don't cover him. Don't cocoon him with what I call absolute encomiums. He doesn't need that. He would have never approved of the kind of mythification that is being done. Be factual, be very careful in talking about Ray. Using, great, fine, brilliant is very easy to do, but it is time that we evaluate Ray, analyze his creation, and see and place it in a tradition and what it is trying to build as well. Thank you so much. If there are questions, I'm open to that. I hope I made sense. I hope I haven't scared people.
No,
because,
no, you have made sense. Noena, could you take up the questions?
Yeah, I can.
Well, there aren't any questions. Rather, there's a lot of adulation coming.
That's, again, I'm warning against that.
That's natural. Yeah. We are all spellbound.
I was like, if you're like asking me personally, I mean, there's a lot of information, a lot of jumble I've got on my paper. I was taking notes. So
right.
I would like, if
is
you
there a
ask
book?
me personally, I would say that if Pinaki had been running a course on Ray's art.
No, I am actually. So one of my
members,
articles has come out in Marg, which is the art magazine, but I'm writing a book on Ray. It's a huge book. It's a book on Ray's design specifically. And I want to debunk a lot of myths about Ray's design. And there's a wonderful book that we can always follow. There is Debashish Dev's Rongo Tulir Satyajit, which is a fantastic book. I think Debashish has done his job. Now it is for us to continue. There are also brilliant experts. And I must remember, I am indebted to them. There is Ujjwal Chakraborty. There is Debashish Mukhopadhyay, who is actually coming to talk about them. I'm indebted to him. There is Riddhi Goswami, who is almost my comrade in arms. We normally discuss things with Shondipda. Riddhi and I normally, and Shondipda, we normally work a lot, in books, while doing books. And there are also Pundendu Potri, who actually brought this idea of Ray's design to fore. There are many articles which needs preservation, which we are trying to do. There is, of course, K.J. Subramaniam, who has written. There is Puritosh Sen, who has written on Ray. There is also Shubhendu Dashmunshi, who has written on Ray. So the problem is all these materials are haphazard. They are spread across. And the problem is, you need to be very careful about the dates as well. A lot of things that I've shown actually are confused timelines, and I don't like that. So, of course, this is meant for general audience. So I am actually not trying to do this, in a very religious way, a very definitive way. But Signet Press is beginning, but later. So Ekon is much, much later. So it's like 60s, 70s. And when he's doing his Feluda and Shunku, you can understand that it is much later than when it takes up Shondesh again, right? So there is, you can actually map the evolution of the journey. And I haven't shown anything, I'll just tell you how much we have. And this is something to just let people know. We have the brochures, the brochure designs. We have the poster designers. Most of them are lost. We have the illustrations. He has done more than, I think, 1,500 illustrations. Only some of the originals survive. And if you look at the originals, you'll be astounded, absolutely floored, all done by hand. There was no computer then. And then there are what? There is also layout designs. He even used to do the invitation cards. So there was this club called Sci-Fi Club that was formed. One of the first Sci-Fi Club. We had Premendra Mitra, and he was one of the first, doyens, Audrich Bordon. He designed the brochure, and even inside the brochure is done by him. I have the brochure, and if I can show you, it's such a wonderful piece of art. He did this Patho Bhavan Putrika. He did this college magazines as well, unthinkable. No great designers would do that. But probably, people used to request him and used to do that. Look at the logos that he has done. Nandon logo, Desh logo. Do you know that the iconic Desh logo, Desh, the magazine, Desh magazine logo, done by him? Ajkal is done by him. So the list goes on. And they are brilliant. They are brilliant. And so when we talk about graphic design of Satyajit Ray, we are actually talking about so many aspects. He has done portraits. There is this book called Potikriti, remember? Where he just collection of portraits. He has done everybody from Kurosawa to Punendu Potri, to Rabindranath. He has done many brilliant portraits of Rabindranath, maybe in only one line. We haven't seen them all. So there are things that needs to be collated. He used to even design the magazines, the newspaper magazine ads. I can show you how he actually fitted the Mohanagar ad because he could only buy a strip of paper. Okay? And it's very vertical. How can you do that? So what you do is he designed that particular ad in order to fit in. He was a one-man army. So people actually take offense when Ray says that, director is somebody who controls everything. I think this is only applicable for Ray. Nobody does everything. You can call him a control freak. That is the other side of it. But you have to understand he's doing everything. He's doing music. He's doing everything. So again, I think from his point of view, he's justified in telling that because he thinks he does everything and is in control of everything.
Yes, I was really impressed, Pinaki, the way you were explaining, the way Ray was using multiple techniques, the technical aspects of his art, and it's very impressive. This steadiness of the hand, because unless you have a steady hand, you cannot become a good artist. And at the same time, the myriad influences you mentioned, Matisse, one of the artists I am fond of, I admire, and you mentioned William Morris, somebody whom we really we just think of as a pre-Raphaelite poet, but not as an artist, but as an interior designer.
He's brilliant. He's one of the greatest.
Yes, call it that way. A man for the rich, who would, design draperies for the rich. And at the same time, there is Nandolal. And I was
Vinod Bihari
really stopped when you mentioned Piet Mondrian, because I was, very, very confused when I was shown Broadway Boogie Woogie. And it was taken to be one of his iconic productions. But I was, so very, what should I say? So very confused, so very overwhelmed when I was seeing the way Ray was using fonts. The way he was designing his fonts, because just a while ago we've been watching Nilanjanda's paintings, his portraits, and we were all remarking about his the way the emotions come out in his characters, the eyes, the way he's portraying them. But I was just bowled over by the way, just simple fonts. The way you present these fonts were carrying pronunciations, sounds,
wordplays.
Absolutely mind-boggling.
One of the things, and I must tell you this, and this is a Bauhaus influence. And if you look at the great font designers like Herbert Baird and all that, the problem is, and this is something I want to talk about. So fonts are basically characters that depicts emotion. They are discrete characters. When we look at fonts, for us, they are like living characters. It is always that for book cover designers. For normal people, it is only a kind of a reference to decode, a title or something like that. But for us, they are characters. Every font has a character of its own. So if you look at the history of the font, for example, if you look at the history of Caslon or Garamond, so one of the persons I always talk about when we talk about Renaissance, and we never talk about him, is Aldous Manutius. Without him, you would not get italics. In fact, Erasmus actually published everything under Albert Manutius. The problem is we don't look at things like that, but that's the way you should. And one of the problems that Ray had, they never found time to develop Bengali fonts the way he wanted to. He of course did calligraphies. He always looked at the geometrical shapes of the fonts, and he was interested. There was an interview in Drum magazine given to Borun Chanda where he's actually trying to tell that if I get time, I will actually develop fonts. People know that he developed, 4 fonts, remember? Ray Roman, Daphnis, Holiday Script, and Ray Bizarre. I didn't talk about them here, or maybe it requires one big class because there are a lot of confusions about the font, and Ray had a very complex association with font making, and it's not always a kind of a complete font, which we normally tom-tom about, which is not. And he actually left it because he was ultimately regarded himself as a filmmaker. The problem with Ray is that he never regarded himself as a great graphic designer or as a great artist. He always regarded himself as a very important filmmaker. And all this graphics and everything was just a kind of it used to be the supporting cast to his main prime show, that's filmmaking. So when he actually got involved in Sandesh, that he began to explore the other part of his creative persona, that is his graphic design and his illustration. And he took it seriously because Sandesh was important for him. And later on, when his books became commercial hits, he became financially dependent on books as well, remember? Because it gave him the kind of financial security which filmmaking could never give him. So he began to take this more seriously, only in the later part. But in the initial part, he never took it seriously. There was this person called Punu Babu. He died last year. And he used to come to Ray's residence. And Punu Babu used to say, he was the only person who was there from Pother Panchali, remember? I was very close to Nimai Ghosh as well, but Nimaida only came, Nimaida died, I think 2 years ago, but Nimaida also came only in Gupika in Bakaban, which was much later. Punu Babu was there and only Shomendu Babu is there, but Shomendu Babu is the 4th assistant in Pother Panchali. He's still alive, the only person who is there. And Punu Babu used to say, I always tell Manik, why don't you preserve these things? Because this will be of archival value. Manik, Satyajit Babu used to say that, no, you people think that I am a great designer and illustrator, but I am not. My job is to make films. These are there. So he used to give away things. A lot of things are actually with private collectors. We found last year in Goriahat, Gold Park, I found original sketches by Ray from a footpath. He has given it to someone. Somebody has sold it. We got it back. Initially for a very small amount of money, but we had to pay a premium when it was discovered. But that's the problem. How do you preserve this? So what is Ray Society doing? And this is something that all of you should know, is actually building a museum, and it will come up. The design is already there. So I think it is important to bring everything under one roof. And the only thing you can do is to do a kind of a museum about Ray, every aspect of Ray. I think that will be a good starter, for instance. So, of course, I'm willing to do a course, but I'm always willing to go that extra length in order to write a book, because I think course will only be minimal. The book will be much more. We are also trying to do a huge exhibition outside the country. We cannot reveal everything, but again, only of his illustrations, because even outside the country, even outside Bengal, even within Bengal, people don't know the range of his illustrations and logo design and graphic design. And that's an honest confession. I think, so we need to maybe inspire people to look at it again. So that's my job. I think I want, and many people are doing it now. Young people need to come forward, be the messenger, and try to spread what Ray has done. Phenomenal. And it's not only Ray. If you look at Bongshi Chandragupta's photographs, Ray has shot photographs which are spellbinding. The first time Shandipda showed it to me, I thought it was by Cartier-Bresson, with whom Ray was very close. And it was so good, the photographs. Frankly, it's still not published. And there are so many that I shuddered to think of what would have happened to photographers if he was actually taking up that profession. Frankly, but one thing that I always want to stress, and I'm sorry if I'm overstressing it, is the preparatory nature of Ray. Everywhere he used to do this preparatory sketches a lot. So if you want to do a film, his preparation would be like a year, maybe 6 months, maybe more than that. Even for every illustration, for every drawing, the meticulous nature of the drafts that he used to make. And therein lies the magic of Ray, the auteur, the more, and he never believed in, just going there, doing it and suddenly things happening, okay? And it doesn't happen like that, right? Even if you look at a Ritwik Ghatak film, I refuse to believe that it just happened in the spur of a moment. It was planned. Of course, the illusion is not to show that plan. If you think of Kids, for example, we think that, it suddenly came out in one evening. It cannot happen. If you look at the manuscripts. So I think Ritwik Ghatak's manuscripts are not published that much. There must have been that preparatory phase. But Ray was extra meticulous in doing so. People actually say that he was working within a very controlled environment while doing so. So even for sketches, if you know what you are doing and you don't, do any kind of adaptation when you do the final work, people say that it may be a kind of a limitation. But as far as Ray is concerned, it is not a limitation because his preparatory, drafts are so many that he used to overcome the limitations through preparedness. And I think this is the whole idea of Ray. So Ray is a genius, but remember, he's a hard-working genius. He's a hard-working genius, a damn hard-working genius. I refuse to call him a genius. I call him a man who's a path breaker. He's a clutter breaker. He's a genius, yes, but never took his genius for granted, his mind for granted. I think this is where I think the real secret, the magic of Ray lies.
Thank you, Pinaki, and Shomrita will take over, I think.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I actually just want to remain silent and let this sink in.
I talk a lot, so I should.
No, I want to let this sink in, Pinakida, because I'm so glad you mentioned the thing about the museum, because what we discovered today, and especially through this last presentation, is that he was an institution in himself.
Right.
And sometimes we think everything has been said, but there is still so much that requires to be unearthed. If there is a course, I'm taking it. If there is a book, I am buying it. All of that is
hopefully after 1 year, so 2023.
Yeah, absolutely. Looking forward to this.
And yes, all the best.
Thank you so much, Pinakida. I mean, you've brought in such a new angle to the person that we revere, to the maestro that we otherwise speak about, something that gets, often, it's not highlighted enough.
Right.
This aspect of his genius, so to speak, quote unquote. Right. Absolutely honored to have had you here today.
Thank you.
And I really hope we can, have you over in person once things go back to normal, whatever normal is.
I live close by, so maybe
yes.
That's not a problem.
Thank you so much. I will now invite my colleague, Professor Monali Poddar, to offer the vote of thanks and bring this afternoon to a wrap. It's been absolutely enriching for me. We look forward to seeing you tomorrow at 12 noon for the Maharaja Manindra Chandra Memorial Lecture to be delivered by Mr. Devashish Mukhopadhyay. The session will be chaired by Mr. Shankar Lal Bhattacharya. Over to you, Monalidi.
Yeah, thank you, Shomrita. Am I audible? Yes. Now, this brings us all to the conclusion of today's webinar, Glorious Satyajit, 100 Years and Beyond. So in the past couple of hours, we have had 3 wonderful and riveting presentations from 3 personalities coming from diverse backgrounds who are experts in their own rights. I'm very thankful to Joy, Nilanjan, and Pinaki. They have beautifully shown how Satyajit Ray and his work can be understood and enjoyed by common people like us in myriad forms. On behalf of our college, a big thank you to all three of them for having made this event so special. On behalf of the seminar subcommittee, I thank our college authorities, especially our principal, Dr. Monturam Shamanto, for the wholehearted support and guidance in organizing the webinar. Thank you to all the participants for showing interest and being present at the webinar. Those of you who have registered will be receiving their certificates through email. Our sincere thanks to all the teachers, non-teaching staff, and students of our college who have in some way or the other helped in the successful organization of the webinar. And finally, a big thank you to all the other members of the seminar subcommittee, Amitadi, Noena, Shonjib, Shomrita, Mitali, Shushmita, Rupa, Antora, Rita, Hurmal, and also our TC Secretary, Ona Mitro, for their hard work and their unwavering support. And we must also thank Dr. Abul Salam for his technical help. Let us look forward to having more such events in the near future. Thank you all. Today's webinar ends here and we look forward to your presence tomorrow. আজকের অনুষ্ঠান আমরা এখানেই শেষ করলাম। সকলকে আগামীকাল আমরা আমাদের অনুষ্ঠানে থাকার জন্য অনুরোধ জানাচ্ছি। নমস্কার, ধন্যবাদ। সবাই ভালো থাকবেন।